Good morning, everyone. Can I please ask everyone to ensure the microphones are switched off and for the IT broadcaster, to remind you that this will be an IT broadcast and when the meeting will commence. Welcome to County Planning Committee on Wednesday the 8th of July 2026. I am Councillor Scott Woodhouse, Chair of the Committee, and I'm chairing today's meeting. The meeting is being broadcasted live through our YouTube channel, and before we commence with today's formal business, I would like to cover some of the housekeeping issues for us to follow. Can I ask everyone to switch off or make silent their mobile phones? Please keep microphones switched off at all times unless invited to speak by the Chair, and when invited to speak, please switch on the microphone nearest to you and introduce yourself. We have a number of officers with us this morning who I will now ask to introduce themselves, starting with
Kirsty Charlton, Committee Services.
Neil Carter, I'm the solicitor to the committee.
Stephen Reid, I'm the planning manager.
Louisa Olivier, Senior Planning Officer.
Claire Teasdale, Principal Planning Officer.
Laura Eden, Senior Planning Officer.
David Grace, Senior Landscape Officer.
Dave Smith, Principal Highways Officer.
And Steve Pilkington, Strategic Development Manager.
Thank you very much. Do we have any apologies for absent and substitute members, please?
None today, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest from the committee? No. Can we please approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of June 2026? Thank you. I'd now like to bring you forward to the first meeting, first planning application, and this is application number DM25011345 FPA. This is a location land east of Cars Farm, South Hetton, DH6 to RY, and the description is for a best site in that area. We have a number of speakers today. We have two from the parish council, South Hetton Parish and Hawthorne Parish, and local member is Councillor Mark Rowley. Can I please remind you, you do have unlimited time, but please keep it as short as possible. And today we have some speakers of the objectors, which is Lisa Miller, Gordon Towers, and Dr. Brown Bryan. We have extended the time, so each speaker and the objectors have 2.5 minutes, so you have 7.5 minutes in total to speak. And supporters, Matthew Mortson, who is the applicant from the agent, you also have 7.5 minutes if you need to speak as well. Can I please ask Gillian Rogers from Hetton Parish Council to speak? Sorry, presentation, I do. Sorry, I've gone way ahead of myself. Can I please present it?
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. So this is an application for the construction and installation of a battery energy storage system, associated infrastructure, landscaping, fencing, access tracks, biodiversity net gain, and underground cable corridor on land east of Cars Farm, South Hetton. So I do have one update for committee in that since the report was published, we've had a further objection from Easington Village Parish Council and a local resident, and their concerns are detailed later in this presentation. So this is the red line location plan for the site. So the site comprises 9.79 hectares of land, with 6.16 hectares being in agricultural use, and that's subgrade 3B quality, last used as a winter cereal crop. The remainder is a narrow strip of land required for the proposed grid connection corridor that runs through several fields. The site is both to the south and north of West Lane, South Hetton. South Hetton Village is situated to the west of the site, and Easington is located approximately 1.9 kilometres southeast of the site. The site is currently accessed from the A182 to the southwest, with a secondary field access from West Lane, the C14 to the north. There are no sites of local importance within the site boundary. There are 5 sites of local importance within the relevant impact zone. The nearest ecological designation is the Cowton Ponds Local Wildlife Site, and that's situated adjacent to the western site boundary. The site lies in Flood Zone 1 and within Groundwater Source Protection Zone 3, which are the lowest level in terms of relevant risk levels. So this is an aerial photograph of the site from which you can clearly see the main part of the site is surrounded by agricultural land to the east, open agricultural fields and woodland to the south, Carrs Farm to the west and West Lane to the north. The site of the proposed battery energy storage system compound comprises one field, which is defined by hedgerows and tree planting. This is a view of the site looking north towards the site from the A182, and the red line shows the horizontal extent of the site. This is another view taken from the A182 looking northeast. You can see the overhead power lines that cross the site, and that the site terrain undulates, rising from the south to the north and rising from east to west towards the farm buildings located to the west. This view is taken from the bus turning circle at Windermere Road, looking southeast towards the site. Again, you can just make out the current electrical equipment already visible in view. And this is another viewpoint taken from near Great Co-op Farmhouse on West Lane, looking northwest towards the site. As you can see, there's existing roadside hedgerow which will help to screen the site. And this is a photograph taken from Great Co-op Farmhouse, a private rather than a public view towards the site, and that has clear view of the site. And this is a photograph of the proposed operational access point, and that's from West Lane. And this is a view of the proposed temporary construction access from the A182, which is opposite some residential properties. And this slide shows the site layout. The BESS compound site is split into two main areas. We've got a battery unit deployment area along the eastern side of the site and a high voltage setup substation and control room in the northwest portion of the site. The battery unit deployment area comprises 98 battery containers and ancillary plant and structures. The substation is separately enclosed and incorporates transformers, a control room, amongst other ancillary features. The site also has internal access tracks and a 2.4 metre high security fence. This slide shows the proposed landscaping, which includes infill planting of hedgerows, planting of new sections of native species-rich hedgerows, hedgerow trees, planting of woodland and native scrub, and a wildflower meadow habitat creation. And this slide shows a typical BESS container elevation. And this slide shows the proposed substation compound elevations. The highest pieces of equipment here is a transformer and buzz bars, and that's at a height of 12 metres. So this is a montage provided by the developer showing some visuals from Windermere Road post-development, and that's at 1 year where you can see the substation equipment above the landscaping, and then the slide below shows the site at 10 years post-construction with landscaping having matured. In terms of consultations and representations, there have been objections from Hawthorne Parish Council, Merton Parish Council, Seaham Town Council, Southampton Parish Council and Easington Village Parish Council, collectively raising concerns over landscape impact, loss of agricultural land, safety, cumulative impacts with other similar developments, the lack of consideration of brownfield sites, biodiversity impacts, highway safety, residential amenity, drainage, the lack of an EIA and pollution. Other statutory consultees do not object, subject to conditions where appropriate. Internal and external consultees do not object, subject to conditions, an agreement and informatives where appropriate. However, the Design and Conservation section identify minor harm to a non-designated heritage asset, and the Landscape section identify moderate adverse impacts locally and minor adverse impacts to the wider landscape, reducing over time as landscaping matures. Councillor Mark Rowney and the former Councillor David Cumming object to the application due to the application not being supported by an EIA and the lack of wider consultation. So turning to consultations and representations, the application has been advertised in the local press by site notice, and individual notification letters have been sent to 1,313 neighbouring properties. A total of 700 written representations have been received in response to the consultation exercise from the public, East Durham Action Group and the Campaign for the Protection of Rural England. Of these, 698 letters object to the proposals. A total of 113 of the letters of objection were from outside of the county or are not considered to be in the local area. There's also a petition submitted with 771 signatures from local persons objecting to the proposal. Turning to further written representations, concerns raised are fully detailed in the report, but the objections are broadly mainly in relation to cumulative impact, the principle of the development, safety, landscape impact, residential amenity, highway safety and impacts to the public right of way, drainage and impacts to wildlife. There is one letter of support from a local resident. Their support of the best development to support renewable energy and opposing the points raised by the objectors. Graham Morris MP objects to the application on the following summarised grounds. The scale and industrial appearance would have a significant and lasting visual intrusion on the rural agricultural landscape. The proposal would disrupt ecosystems, displace wildlife and degrade biodiversity, and the submitted ecological survey does not consider seasonal migration patterns or cumulative impacts. The site is too close to residential properties who would suffer noise, vibration and light pollution, harming amenity and quality of life. BESS installations carry inherent risks and the possibility of thermal runaway, fire and explosion, and the application lacks emergency response measures and is too close to properties. That the access point on the A182 is not suitable, and that the development would lead to congestion and worsen road safety issues on the road. That there's significant public opposition to the proposal which should not be overlooked. So turning to summary and conclusions, the proposal is acceptable in principle in respect of County Durham Policy 10, Policy 27 and Policy 33. The MPPF is a material consideration and accordingly significant weight is given to the benefits associated with renewable and low carbon energy generation and the proposal's contribution to a net zero future. There are other material considerations in respect of national policy statements, government-declared climate emergency, intergovernmental reports, government action plans and planning practice guidance which support the provision of battery storage to assist in the delivery of renewable energy which carry significant weight in favour of the scheme. The proposal would result in moderate adverse landscape and visual amenity and landscape harm. There'd be some limited harm to residential amenity and to a non-designated heritage asset, but these harms are temporary and considered acceptable in terms of the plan and balance, resulting in no conflict with policy. The development otherwise complies with the relevant County Durham Plan and NPPF policies on highway safety, layout and design, heritage, ecology, flooding and drainage, agricultural land and cumulative impact. The development would not conflict with the County Durham Plan when read as a whole. Material considerations raised do not indicate that the plan should not be followed, and the application is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lisa. Now moving on to the speakers. Can I invite Gillian Rogers to speak first from South Hetton Parish Council? You don't have a time frame, but can you please keep it as short as possible? Thank you.
Hi, I'll do my best. Is the microphone picking me up? Hi, so Jill Rogers, Chair of South Hetton Parish Council. I've lived in South Hetton for 43 years. I've been a parish councillor for 36 of them. We've seen an awful lot go on in that time. So we were a Category D village and that's never been lifted, so not suitable for any kind of development. However, we did get social housing to replace the slums that we had from the colliery days, and we've continued to grow and thrive as a community over the time that I've lived in the village. In the last few years, we've seen a whole host of new housing be built in the area, and people have come to our village because they recognise it as a place where you can live in peace, you can bring your children up, you can educate them at the local school. We've got an outstanding doctor's surgery, we've got a community centre, a cricket club and a fantastic park. All of those things, both people in the village and the parish council have striven to develop over those years, where we've got access to walkways that link us up to all over in County Durham. What worries me here is that what we haven't got and never have had is that cleaning up of what was the colliery site. We had 2 pits in our village, so although it's called Hawthorne, it was well established that Hawthorne Coke Works and colliery was in South Hetton. We had South Hetton Colliery, while other people got Dalton Park and Rayton Meadows and Harrington Park. What we got was the remainder of an attempt to clear the land that leaves us with wet, thick grey sludge in the winter and dry grey dust in the summer. What we have as a result of that is, in the park, we had to close a football pitch because the runoff from that failed reclamation had such high levels of lead that we couldn't let anyone play football on it. So to close it down and tree it over to try and improve the quality of that land. What's absolutely terrifying today is that less than 3 weeks ago, we were notified by Northumbrian Water that a new housing estate that's been built in South Hetton had been randomly tested, and it was 6 times the safe level of lead in the drinking water in those new houses. All of that is because of runoff from the historical abandonment, basically, following the closure of the pits, and because we weren't considered to be an important village and we live right on the border with Sunderland, we just never got any investment. But in spite of that, we've increased the number of houses, people want to live there, we've got a fantastic community spirit, we've raised huge amounts of money, we have 2 Ray Lonsdale sculptures in our village. Ray operates out of our village. His son is now a renowned artist and operating out of our village. Every factory unit, every shop in the village is occupied and buzzing. The school's thriving. The community centre is thriving. What we don't seem to get is that opening the floodgates for this, if this goes ahead, on the back of it, there are 14 more applications to fill just about every field between us and Hawthorne and Easington Village and us and Merton, and beyond Merton over to Seaton and Slingley and into Ryhope, and I think you've got one of those on the cards today. We're just going to be completely and utterly overwhelmed with every greenfield site opportunity just being filled with any kind of production. All of this has come on the back of our willingness to play our part in renewable energy. We made no objections to the Scotland Eastern Green Link project. No one objected. We could see the sense in it. They were largely using brownfield land. They gave commitments to put back into the community and to try and help us recover some of that land. Unfortunately, it would appear that on the back of that increased capacity to the network, all of these other money-making attempts to store your electricity cheap and then sell it back to you more expensively have all jumped on the back of it. And it's going to leave Hawthorne and South Hetton just completely and utterly in a new version of a industrial landscape. We're going to just be completely surrounded by it. The road accesses, what we need to understand is the A182 is a primary link whenever the A19 or the A1 go down. So the traffic through our village, whenever there's an accident on those major roads, and that's often, is absolutely crazy. The access road down from the A182, there's a right-hand turn that will take you down onto the road to Hawthorne. The proposal is that we're going to remove all of the safety measures. It's a really, really wide junction, but the big wagons can't make it round it, and there isn't any other way in. So the proposal is that they're going to take the safety island out, the refuge in the middle of that road, for as long as all of this development goes on. So all of our kids who will be living almost on this, at that side of the village, will have a massive wide road to cross with loads of traffic, with no island in the middle, all the time that this development goes on. It seems to me that we all understand the need for renewable energy. What we don't understand is for the developers to be able to do it as cheaply as possible, they're just going to absolutely surround our village. We'll have nothing left to look at that isn't filled with some sort of renewable energy construction. And it seems that that's very unfair, that having not really properly recovered from the industrialisation of the last century, we're now going to find ourselves overwhelmed by the next version of it. It just feels that people have been completely and utterly missed out of this equation, and I'm asking you to stop and consider what impact that will have on a community that is at the moment increasing. We're selling houses, there's new builds going on, we're proud, we work together as a community to raise money to improve things. We're about to have a huge play zone. We've managed to raise £285,000 to put a new five-a-side football in the park. We've got 6 cricket teams, we've got 3 football teams, we've got 2 bowls teams. We've got a wildlife area that we had to create when we had to shut the football down because of the lead poisoning. We've got all of that going on, and we just want to continue to live our lives in a way that we've been self-sufficient over the last 40 years. We don't object in principle. We've been happy to have Eastern Green Link. I'm well aware that Morven are about to duplicate the Eastern Green Link, so we'll be getting another massive converter station with pipework coming under the sea. But what I'd suggest is, if they can make it economical to bring it under the sea and bring it in here and convert it and put it into the grid, why is it necessary for all of these other generating organisations to have it literally within less than a kilometre of the station? If they can bring it all that way and do all of that, why does it all literally have to be on our doorsteps right around our village? I think that fundamentally what I want to say to you is, where's the people in all of this? Where are the people who've worked hard to build the community that we've got and are proud of where we live and want to continue to grow that? That's what I'm asking you to consider here.
Thank you, Gillian. Can I ask Councillor Irvine from Hawthorne Parish to speak next? Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. My name is Sheila Irving. I'm the chairman of Hawthorne Parish Council. Hawthorne is a very small rural village situated 1.5 miles east of South Hetton. I have lived in the East Durham area all my life and have seen the ebb and flow of the different types of industry over the last 60 years. When we lost the mining industry, the area became even more visually unpleasant. But over the last few decades, the East Durham area has improved. not only visually, but economically. Now this area is faced with yet another visually unsatisfactory industry, that of BESS installations and solar farms. Do we know sufficient about this new industry? Before granting approval of it, do we know sufficient about it? To grant such approval will be at the loss of vital agricultural land as well as wildlife. And once again, the East Durham area will become visually impaired, but with a different scar on the landscape. Why is there insufficient information in connection with the safety and fire aspect of these new installations? I would like to see the East Durham area continue to flow towards a better economical future, as well as a much needed visual one. East Durham needs and deserves a better future without BESS installations and solar farms. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Irvine. Can I invite Councillor Mark Rowney to speak, please?
Yeah, hi. If you don't mind, I'm going to remain seated. I'm not too well at the moment. But firstly, I'd just like to introduce myself, Councillor Mark Rowney. I represent Merton, South Hetton and Hawthorne wards. It's quite obvious to me that the local people within all wards around that area are completely opposed to this industrial, how should I put it, corralling of the local inhabitants. This is like almost like a sort of feudal barrier being placed around them. I've not heard one concern about how people's houses are going to lose value, how their insurances are going to go up. Very little when it comes to what the committee or what the industry would call consultation. It's nothing, and I hope this isn't going to be another example of the people wanting one thing and they're just being ignored. I have a series of questions. I'm not expecting the committee itself to answer these right now, but I will put them forward, and I will also be giving you them in writing. But I'd just like to bring up a couple of things. I'd also just quickly like to say that many people in the community have concerns. Concerns are the engine room of fear and worry, and that's ongoing. So God knows what happens in the future if I think you make the wrong decision here. Anyways, I've got a couple of questions I'm just going to read off, so just apologies if there's a little bit of a delay. Noting that the UK does not have its own standards and regulations for BESS, what is the expectations of emissions, both particulate and chemical, that will occur in the event of a BESS fire, and over what distances will these emissions disperse into the local community? Has account been given to the highly toxic nature of the gases and particulates in the fires, and especially to the ultrafine particles? Has the battery supply provided any test evidence of emissions in a battery fire? Very serious questions. I was at a meeting some months ago at South Hetton and asked the representatives of the company what they were doing for safety, and it was quite shocking, really. After being in there for half an hour, I was told there'll be cameras. That's it, cameras. Where will the evacuated residents go? Is there any kind of policy or system put in place? If there is a problem, a disaster, I would call it. Where will the water come from to suffocate the flames and cool all the other containers? Where will the water run off? I mean, this water could run off into all the aquifers. How will this toxic water affect the aquifer, residents, wildlife, surrounding crops? I mean, I hear about planting of trees and beautiful meadows. I mean, is this done so residents can walk in these areas as well? I don't think so. It's lip service, more lip service, as if the residents are going to be fooled by some green words when all the time they're living in fear. Can I also draw attention to the fact that the fire safety must be evidential and demonstrated. There's nothing in the plans about what would happen. This is guidance. It's not regulated. I'd like to just finish by saying it's the residents that we're here to work for, not just of the county, but of our wards and constituencies. And their worries should be our worries and should be taken seriously. These are important issues. People's livelihood, after our previous speaker so elegantly put, have worked for decades to get these areas out of the slough of despond that they were in, have worked hard, from parish councils to individual residents giving up their time, only for this slap in the face, and that's what it is, a slap in the face. And I asked the committee to think hard about this, and I asked them to refuse this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I now please ask Lisa Miller, Gordon Towers and Dr Brian Brown to speak as objectors? You do have 7.5 minutes, we extended it, so please split the time between you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Lisa Miller, and thank you for your time, and Chair, members. I'm speaking today on behalf of the East Durham Action Group and local residents, and as a local resident. EDAG submitted fully referenced report supported by Professors Dobson and Edwards of Oxford University raises public safety questions that still have not been properly answered. The planning officer requested cumulative impact assessment on the 16th of February this year, confirming that this is not an isolated application, but that request omitted cumulative safety risk. Why? Public safety is vital. The assessment covered landscape, noise, ecology and highways, but not BES fire risk, explosion, toxic plume risk, emergency response or evacuation. Why was safety left out when the applicant refers to a consented Hawthorne Pit development cluster and our villages are being increasingly surrounded by large-scale energy infrastructure? Public safety must carry serious weight here. For 98 container 200 megawatt minimum 400 megawatt hour BESS near homes, farms, wildlife sites, watercourses and groundwater and existing grid infrastructure. Members need clear site-specific safety evidence before voting. Call it a worst-case scenario plan or whatever you want, or something else. Members need enough reliable safety information before voting so they can lawfully and responsibly judge whether this site is acceptable in this location. The conditions requested, including by the fire service, show that key safety matters remain unresolved. Conditions are not evidence. Professor Dobson's calculation equates one BESS unit to approximately 3.5 tonnes of TNT. Yet you were being asked to approve 98 lithium-ion BESS containers on a landlocked site. The access concerns are set out in our report.
30 seconds remaining.
Gillian has already pointed out that the key point is simple. The site doesn't have suitable access for a major energy response. The Vistra Moss Landing incident in California shows why this matters. That plant was inside a former power station with thick concrete walls, yet it still went into thermal runaway. took days to extinguish, released toxins into the atmosphere and reported side effects that were experienced up to 20 miles away. This site is in open countryside, exposed to coastal winds, close to homes, farmland and environmental receptors. 40 years is not temporary, it's 2 generations. We're being asked to approve a long-term industrial development without the full safety, emergency, decommissioning and liability evidence settled now. So I ask you, why was cumulative safety risk excluded from the assessment request? Where is the worst case scenario plan? And why have EDAG's public safety questions not been answered before members are asking to vote? This is not a minor technical detail. This is public safety. If the safety evidence is incomplete, this application can't be approved. Thank you.
Gordon Towers, could you speak now, please? Can I please remind you have 2.5 minutes?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, some of the information can be very technical. The EDAG report provides greater details. The BESS takes power from the source, any source, including gas power generation from the national grid, and stores it. The BESS does not generate net zero power. It is chemical energy storage system. It has the potential to be very dangerous with short and long-term irreparable damage to human health and the environment. The application has failed to address fully the concerns raised. They have not mitigated or proven to mitigate against the dangers of the material considerations. Capacity of the energy stored, as Lisa said, is equivalent to 400 megawatt hours. And that's the least. If they put a bigger battery in, it's even greater than that. Evaluation of the legislation and statutory permissions, such as the Planning Dangerous Substance Act, the Control of Major Accident Hazards, Hazardous Substance Consent. There's a document in the Durham portal under the application DM2201769, appeal proof of evidence on the technical matters, and this is regarding the BESS units. The document and other supporting documents in the application provides technical evidence that shows that the thresholds in megawatt hours that is likely to trigger the requirement for these different regulations, obligations for lithium-ion BESS and different variations of it. Where they exceed the allowable control quantity is 1 megawatt hour contaminated firewater, 15.5 megawatt hours explosive articles. Then there's various
30 seconds remaining.
Various releases of flammable gases, highly toxic and acute gases, up to 45.7 megawatts. The application is more than 8 times greater than the highest threshold shown. It must comply with the relevant legislation and statutory requirements. The situation is more dangerous than the high voltage conductors that run from north to south over the site, as we've seen. Page 10 of the National Grid document in the actual planning application. National Grid does not recommend that any type of flammable material is stored under overhead lines. Developers should be aware that the local fire authority will not use water to put the fires out on high voltage conductors within 30 meters of the actual conductors themselves, and that's on the ground out over. In these situations, National Grid would have to be notified and reconfigure the system to allow the staff to switch the overhead lines. So you wouldn't be able to firefight for about 4.5 hours. A number of the BESS containers and equipment fall within that distance. Internal access to the battery storage units are from one direction only and not 2 opposite directions as required by the National Fire Chiefs Council. Battery containers are situated back to back with no spacing between them, paired containers, and a distance of approximately 3 meters between the nearest adjacent pair. The recommended minimum spacing between BESS containers is 6 meters as stated by the National Fire Chief Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Can I invite Dr. Brian Brown to speak now, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. I guess I don't have to remind feedback. I guess I don't have to remind members of the Planning Committee that as elected members, you are the custodians of the well-being of the community you serve. And as such, every decision taken in this chamber should consider that well-being. Yet today, in this chamber, members have been...
Sorry, does anyone have a device next to the microphone?
We've moved them.
Right.
Shall I start again, Chair? Or are you happy to continue? Is that better? Okay. I wouldn't care. I've spoken many times in this chamber, Chair, but I haven't learned the technology yet. So yet, today in this chamber, members have been asked to consider approving a best development that has inherent high failure risk factors that will undoubtedly place those communities at risk, and indeed the people of those communities at risk of harm. We know that best failures are well documented, including in the UK, the Liverpool incident in 2019, and none of this reads very well. The question here is, how would you like to live next to a best development when you know that if it fails, it's going to do you some serious harm? No one would want to do that. The risks associated with best technology is well documented in the East Durham Action Group report that has been submitted in support of the objections to this development, and I'm sure will form part of members' deliberation as they move forward in this application. One thing I'd like to stress is that BESS is a relatively new technology. It brings with it a level of complexity that goes beyond the normal planning process. That complexity requires input from experts in the field, over and above that expertise available to members from the planning process. To simply apply material evidence tests within the planning legislation is insufficient, given the complexity of the science and the risks identified. And we've heard a good bit from the two previous speakers about that. I mean, in order for us to understand, East Durham Action Group consulted, as already mentioned, with Professor Pete Dobson and Professor Edwards from the University of Oxford. And that gave us a greater understanding so that we could produce a report that was researched, well-researched, peer-reviewed and factual, and I think above challenge because of the facts that are in there. But given the lack of independent expertise to assist members in their decision-making on this best development, I would urge members to, at this
30
stage,
seconds remaining.
refuse the application or, as a minimum, defer the decision to allow time for members to seek expert support in their decision-making. And I'd like to leave members with this thought. Our communities bore the brunt of the first industrial revolution. Really, you can't expect us to bear the brunt of this green revolution. And just one example, it took, on the site of the old Hawthorne coking plant, it took years to decontaminate, and it cost millions of pounds. The offshore of Seaham was contaminated for 3 miles out to sea and decimated all the marine life. We certainly do not want to encounter those situations again. I urge you to refuse this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Brian Brown. Can I ask for Matthew Mortensen to speak now on behalf of the applicant as a supporter? Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Matthew Mortensen, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the applicant in support of the proposed battery energy storage system on land located at West Lane, South Hetton. I have been involved with this proposal from its early stages, including community consultation, through to the submission of the application and post-submission discussions with the planning officer. We note the local objections received to the application, and I hope to address some of the main themes raised. BESS plays a critical role in strengthening the UK's energy security and the resilience of the national grid transmission system. by storing electricity when supply exceeds demand and releasing it when needed, they support the efficient use of renewable energy and contribute to the transition to a low-carbon system. National planning policy is clear that significant weight should be given to these benefits, and your officers have recognised this in their assessment. Turning to the site, its location has been driven primarily by the need to connect into the national grid at the nearby Hawthorne Pit substation. As the officer report explains, this locational requirement is a key factor for developments of this nature and limits the number of suitable sites available. The site itself is not subject to statutory landscape or ecological designations, is located in Flood Zone 1 and is not best and most versatile agricultural land. While there are nearby environmental receptors, officers and consultees are satisfied that impacts can be appropriately mitigated and controlled through conditions. I know that the decommissioning process is a matter which has been raised by residents. This is a temporary permission limited to 40 years, and conditions recommended within the officer's report requires a full scheme of decommissioning and restoration of the land back to its current state at the end of the operational life. In terms of the landscape and visual effects, I want to address this matter directly as it is clearly of concern to local residents. Officers conclude that the landscape impacts are not unacceptable in planning terms and will be reduced over time through the proposed landscaping and mitigation measures. The additional planting proposed, including along the northern boundary, will help soften views from South Hetton and improve integration with the surrounding landscape as it matures. While some localised effects will remain, officers are clear that these do not justify refusal when considered in the overall planning balance. On ecology, the scheme delivers a substantial biodiversity net gain, which will be secured through the legal agreement. Officers are satisfied that ecological impacts can be properly mitigated and managed, including in relation to nearby sites through the imposition of conditions. The Environment Agency, Environmental Health, Ecology, the Highway Authority and the Fire and Rescue Service all raise no objection, subject where appropriate to conditions. With regards to fire safety, the project has been designed to NFCC guidance with container separation of approximately 3 metres, well in excess of the 0.9 minimum recommended by the NFCC. 2 independent access points are provided for emergency vehicles, and 3 emergency water tanks give over 2 hours of firefighting supply, exceeding the NFCC requirements. The Fire and Rescue Service raised no objection, subject to a condition securing an ongoing battery safety management plan and emergency response plan. Officers conclude that while the development would give rise to identified harms, these are not unacceptable and are outweighed by the substantial public benefits associated with the energy storage infrastructure. In conclusion, members are being asked to determine the proposal that is supported in principle by planning policy has been subject to detailed technical assessment and which officers recommend for approval. While I fully acknowledge the concerns by residents, the evidence before you demonstrates that those concerns can be appropriately addressed through mitigation and planning conditions and that the remaining impacts are acceptable in planning terms. For these reasons, I respectfully ask members to support the officer recommendation and grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I please ask the planning officer now to speak and answer some of the questions from the speakers, please?
Thank you, Chair. So just in terms of sort of fire safety and emissions, in terms of planning, we tend to look at safety in terms of the land use rather than going into the technicalities of process and emissions, as they're covered by other guidance. So all we're really required to do is consult with the Fire Authority and use their most up-to-date guidance, which we have done in this case. The Fire Authority haven't objected. They have requested a condition. We have assessed the development against the guidance, and it does comply with the 2025 guidance. It will have to comply with any future guidance if it's not constructed during the time period that guidance sort of is relevant. So we have conditioned a battery safety management plan, and that will include a need for an emergency plan. And as part of that, the Fire Authority would have to identify if there's a need for a plume assessment to ensure residents are not affected in the event of a fire outbreak. But in terms of sort of Councillor Mark Rowley was concerned about potential evacuations. As far as I'm aware, having looked at, there's been very minimal fire outbreaks at Bess's. The ones where there has been, I think there's been 2. No local residents have had to be evacuated from the site. As Matthew Mortensen, the agent, has said, there's water tanks on the site, 3 water tanks on the site. Those will have to be continually maintained to the top level in case there is a fire. They would use that in the event of a fire in terms of cooling any containers next door to the container that is on fire. Usually the containers would be left to burn themselves out. That's usually what happens. In terms of sort of the drainage of any potentially fire, if fire water is, you know, sort of produced from any water that's put on the fire, then that will have to be kept separate from any of the surface water, drainage water. And we have agreed a condition that those details will have to be agreed before any development commences. Obviously, there's a lot of concern from all the local residents and the parish councils about the impacts of these kind of developments generally and the amount of developments locally. Obviously, totally understand those concerns. We have recognised in the report that there are some harms. There's landscape harm, residential amenity harm, some limited harm to an undesignated asset and hedgerow. But obviously we also have to take into account national and local plan policy, and significant weight is to be afforded to the benefits of these kind of renewable energy developments and low carbon developments. In this instance, in the terms of the plan and balance, my consideration is the benefits outweigh those negatives. In terms of sort of the cumulative impacts going forward, it's a consideration at the moment that yes, if further schemes come forward, they may reach a tipping point, but this scheme in itself, along with the ones that have already been approved, hasn't reached that point as yet. Any further schemes that come about, if this one has been developed, they will have to take this one into consideration, and those will be considered on their own merits at that time.
Thank you for that. Can I please now open the floor to questions from the members? Councillor Wilkes.
Thanks, Chair. I've got 2 questions. One's probably for the applicant, the other probably for the legal officer. So one of the residents raised concerns about, well, why does this all have to happen in this location? So we know we've got the Seagull 1 pipeline coming in with 2 gigawatts of electric, and the purpose of these plants is to store electric, presumably the overnight side of things when we're not using as much, so it can then be used during the day. I guess the question I've got for the applicant is, why does it have to be so close? Is this purely a cost issue? Because we're going to see more of these applications, and we need to understand this as a committee. The second question I've got is related to, because when I'm looking at all the different issues here, the one that this seems to be coming back to is safety, from a point of view of what residents are concerned about. And paragraph 248 of the report says that national policy is clear that the focus of planning applications should be on whether a proposal is acceptable use of land rather than the control of processes where these are subject to separate regimes. Planning decisions should assume that these regimes will operate effectively. For the above reasons, there's nothing in relation to the safety of the BESS which should weigh against the proposal of the planning balance. And that was what the planning inspector decided in another case down in Mid-Devon. So I guess my question for the legal officer is, what is there within the NPPF and the local policies that we have that would allow us, if we wanted to turn this application down in relation to safety of the site? Because I don't see it myself from what I'm reading from that appeal, which went through to the Secretary of State, I believe, as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Matthew, can I just ask to answer that question on the location, please?
Yeah, so the need for the proximity to national grid is effectively it comes down to viability, because the further you are away from the national grid, the more it costs to connect. So we're approximately, I can't remember how far we are from the national grid, but we're close. So therefore, the cost of the connection isn't as great because the cable route isn't as far. If you're further away, then you pay more for the cable route. You also lose some of the electricity in transmission if you're further away from the national grid point of connection as well. So,
if I could come back, Chair, if that's all right. So I understand the loss of electricity from transmission, but clearly the quality of technology we have now means that over a certain distance you don't lose that much electricity. Otherwise we wouldn't have all of these pylons and all of these cables running around the country anyway. So I guess it comes down to the cost of getting it to your site. So if you're going to be storing 400 megawatts of energy that you're probably going to be buying for in the pence, so a few pence here, because it's the overnight energy, which at the moment people are charging the cars up for what, 6, 7, 8 pence, rather than the 20, 30, 40 pence we have to pay during the day, then you'd think that, well, perhaps the amount of money that you will make is in the tens, if not hundreds of millions of pounds over the lifetime of this project. So I would be concerned going forward that we make sure that we don't see a cumulative impact in one part of the county purely because somebody's trying to save a bit of money today when they know that they're going to make an absolute fortune tomorrow.
I think the other point, obviously each application needs to be assessed on its own merits, and applications which follow this one then have to be assessed separately. I think the other point to consider in terms of proximity to the substations, also the environmental impacts of the installation of the cable route. For example, if you're 5-10 kilometres away from the point of connection, your cable route is then going to have to disrupt the environmental impacts for that 5-10 kilometres to the point of connection, which is obviously going to have greater impacts, is going to have greater implications in terms of land ownership, possibly digging up the highway, the road, etc. So there are other implications as opposed to just viability.
Thank you, Chair.
Am I able just to come back on some of the fire safety points? Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, it was just to stress that this is a matter that the applicant has taken extremely seriously, and it's clearly in the applicant's best interest to ensure that sites are properly managed and up to the necessary regulations and fire safety regulations. And we have had meetings with the Fire and Rescue Service prior to this committee to make sure that they are happy with the scheme put forward. So that was integral to the design. That's before members at this moment in time. So it was just to stress that point that the applicant has taken this matter extremely seriously, had discussions and meetings with the appropriate fire officers to make sure everything is covered off and is as safe as possibly can be moving forward.
Thank you, Matthew. Neil, can you answer the second question, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So Councillor Wilkes asked about whether fire safety and risk would be a sustainable reason for refusal. The short answer to that is no, it wouldn't. And that's, as Councillor Wilkes also alluded to, is set out in paragraph 248 of the officer's report. That summarises conclusions that have been reached by an inspector on a previous BESS site appeal. And it also references the guidance in the NPPF. But in short, what that's essentially telling us is that it's not for the planning system to get to the bottom of the safety of this technology. We have to assume that where other regimes are controlling that they operate effectively, and the focus of the planning system is about whether this is an appropriate use in land use terms. So we've gone as far as we can in terms of looking at that as an issue. We've consulted the fire authority. The case officer is proposing a condition in line with their advice, which will control the future management plan. That's as far as we can really go on that issue.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Chair. Alan Bell, the Lumley West Drayton Division. Yeah, I was going to, one of the questions I did, but it's probably not related to the planning objection, was the need of it. When I went there this morning, you come to us like, what is the need to actually have this in this location, like in this purpose, and like then you start to wonder what's to come down the line. But as I say, there's probably not a planning reason for refusal. The question I did have was for the landscape section for David. Was on reading the report, David, I'm trying to sort of, I think it balances on whether there's an objection in there regarding the landscape harm. As I said on the landscape, on the site visit this morning, the field's full of wheat, barley, whatever was in there. And then you try to visualise sort of 98 sort of containers and everything else in this application in that field. And the harm is immense, I would say. And I just like some clarification on your summing up on the report, David. Thank you.
Thank you. The site itself, there are moderate to major impacts. We have used our own methodology to, excuse me, to come to that conclusion. And at site level, the magnitude of change would be incredibly high. There are 12-metre high structures there, which are clearly going to be visible. In terms of the landscape itself that the site sits in, it's not a designated landscape, but it does form an important tract of what I consider attractive landscape between South Hetton, between the town of Peterlee, between Haswell, Easington and Hawthorne. So you've got this lovely undulating rural landscape, and it does step out into open countryside. But we have used our standard methodology in accordance with industry guidelines to look at the landscape impacts, and we've articulated the harm to the planners in that context. And obviously there are visual receptors that are going to see the site in Windermere Road along the 182. There are residences very near to the site, and they will get close-up views. So the impacts will be high, and then the mitigation is going to take some time to establish, because there are parts of the site you can clearly see now, and there's going to be hedgerow removed to accommodate access. So the actual mitigation itself will take some time, as shown in the photo montages, to establish to the point where it does screen. And even in the 10-year photo montage, you could still see some of those structures protruding above that, and people are going to see that. Does that help to answer the question?
It does, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that, David. And as you say, it's sort of the land, the majority of this site is in a valley, so it doesn't matter what landscape sort of is put in there. It's sort of it's going to be probably impossible to screen it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Potts.
Yeah, two quick questions. One is, I know we were talking about the cumulative impact of this, and we're saying that it doesn't meet any type of, barriers right now. Where are those barriers, and what type of legislation are we looking at that? Because, if you're one of the local people in County Durham, I think you would probably disagree that the amount of plan applications for solar, BESS and other things that are coming in don't already meet that. So can I ask, what is, first of all, what is the criteria for that we're not meeting? And second of all is with regards to the site itself. I know we're saying that we've got approximately 2 hours worth of water that's going to be used for fire service when they come to put it out. As far as I'm aware, that the current process for BESS vehicles for the fire service is to basically pick a vehicle up and put it in a big skip and leave it for as long as possible, the submerging water to cool it down. 2 hours doesn't seem a great deal of time for water. They're obviously going to add to that. And if that is the case, obviously the site, what is the containment of that water? Obviously it'll need to be bundled, the site itself, but what will be the capacity of water that will be contained at maximum, remembering with rain and all those other things, that can then leach out into the local becks, streams, aquifers, which if it soaks down, and then into the coast itself?
Yeah, so in terms of barriers, there isn't really a set one. Each application would have to be considered on its own merits. Obviously, we do have a new County Durham plan that will come into effect at some point, and I'm not sure if that is something they're considering, but I can't confirm that one way or the other at the moment, whether that will make any difference to that. Yes, in terms of the water storage, it is 2 hours. That's all that's recommended by the fire brigade. So we can't really insist that there's any more than that kept on site. In terms of sort of the drainage of the fire water, we don't have those details as yet, but we have conditioned those details to be agreed, and our drainage engineer was satisfied with that approach.
Sorry, can I just clarify that there isn't a cumulative impact test? We're just saying that we don't think we've met one, but we haven't actually got a test that's there.
Yeah, I'll just add to Louise's comments on that, Chair. I think it's a well-established planning principle that when you're looking at a cumulative impact on a planning application, whether it's landscape impact or highways impact or the cumulative impact of background noise levels, you can normally only take into account those planning approvals that have already either been built or have got a live planning permission on them. And it's my understanding from talking to Louisa and Claire that this is one of the first applications we have in the locality. So I think what we're saying is, if there'd been several other applications in and around the immediate area which would have a cumulative impact in terms of landscape appearance or in terms of highway safety, you can take those into account, Chair. But because we're not at that position, this is relatively one of the newer applications in the area, I think we'd be on rocky ground. And again, just to add to what Louise has said, as I think one or two of the members of the public are aware, we are, and again, as members are aware, we are embarking on a new local plan at present, and as part of that, we will be drafting up new planning policy to do with renewable energies, and I think that will give ourselves, and obviously this is something that full council will need to vote on in time. This will give us the opportunity to reset the planning bar, if you like. The present policies, including the supplementary planning documents that were approved, I think I'm right in saying a couple of years ago by the council, are quite permissive in terms of this type of renewable energy. So I think probably the harder Councillor Potts' question is how we can move forward at a future date, but that's something that we very much understand the challenge on, Chair.
That's great, thank you. Can I just clarify with regards to the bunding for the site and stuff? I know we're only holding 2 hours of water for the fire service to use. I'm not sure what that capacity is going to be, but obviously I'm really concerned that if you're putting out, a battery system which has all the chemicals and things that are in it, the metals and other bits and bobs that are in it, that what we're saying is at some point in the future somebody's going to look at that. I know if you look at any big site, I mean, I regulate large industry in Teesside, and if you look at any of them, basically they will have bunding with regards to Syria 136, which is the regulation for how much water and other things that are going to be there, if that's a nuclear power station, any type of landfill and those type of things. And I think it's, a bit of a strange approach that we could end up with basically a fire, which we have 2 hours of water for. Then we're going to have the fire service pumping in as much as what they need to continuously try to cool down a battery system to stop it impacting on the other battery systems there, which could go on for days or weeks even. And we don't know where we're going to get rid of that water. It's not going to be tanked out. It's not going to be anywhere else. It would have to be contained on site until we can get rid of that. And if we haven't got a capacity of how much we think it's going to be to put out one of these units, never mind 98 of them, if it starts to impact on each other, then where is that water going? The only other place it can go to is into our local streams, rivers and aquifers. That's the only place it can go if it breaches those bunds.
So we haven't asked for those details, and we have made it subject of condition, but the developer is here, so he might be able to give you an idea of the plans for that.
Yeah, so the fire water itself isn't used to put out the battery that's on fire. So it's to cool down the surrounding units to ensure that there's no thermal runaway. So in reality, a lot of the fire water won't be contaminated. However, in case it will be, it's captured and stored on site, and then it will be tested to see if it is contaminated. If it is, it will be taken away. The full details of the drainage scheme are still to be submitted. It's a condition recommended by officers. So in terms of the size of those tanks, etc., that will be needed. Their details, to come forward at a later date. However, the purpose is that, there will be no contamination of surrounding water, surrounding groundwater, etc., to ensure that matter is addressed.
Councillor Wilkes.
Seems a lot of this is going to come down to people's trust of whoever's operating the site. I just want to come to paragraph 162 onwards on highway safety and access, because it was raised by somebody today that that there's going to be the removal of a central island to cross one of the roads, and I just want to understand, because there's no mention of it in the highway response, are we actually saying that there will be the removal of a central island which will make it harder for people to cross the road or not? If so, what's the mitigation that we're putting in place for that?
Dave, are you okay to comment on that?
Yeah, in terms of the accesses, the construction access to the south on the A182, this will be covered under construction management plan. So any alterations to that access will be picked up under Section 184 of the Highways Act. So it'll be up to the applicant to alter anything that's needed, and this can be picked up at a later stage and conditioned.
If I could come back, Chair, because I'm a bit not sure I understand this. Will the applicant be removing a central island which people cross halfway across the road safely so they then can cross the other half, or not? And if that is going to be conditioned somewhere in there, what is the alternative for people?
In terms of the access, the 1A4 access, that will be, as I say, picked up under 1A4. The highways officer was happy with the tracking of the vehicles through in and out of the site. In terms of there was to be compound curbs installed across that area. The area is within a 30-mile-an-hour zone, and that. So for clarity, in terms of the access, it was going to be obviously tracked. It'd be put in the construction management plan, and it'd be operated safely and efficiently.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry, I'll let the applicant speak.
It was just about, I'm not entirely sure what the central portion people are talking about. In terms of the construction into the site, what's being proposed is that it comes from the A19 along the A182 and goes straight into the site from the south. So there's no traffic going into the construction traffic going into the village itself. It's all coming in and turning off before it enters the village.
Chair, it was pointed out by somebody that they would have to remove a central island at some point because of the size of the vehicles that would be coming along. I'm simply trying to understand where that is, if that is the case or not, and what the mitigation that will be put in place is.
Dave, have you got anything more for that or not? Highways. Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously I have some clarity. Obviously we have a transport assessment which my colleagues looked at, and it was all tracked, and there was curb works and other off-site works to be in there, but there was no specific reference to an island. There is an island within the A182 access, and I didn't know whether you meant the pedestrian or is it traffic island?
As you come in on the A182, when you come into the village and you pass the field where these units will be, and you've got to come across probably a couple of hundred houses whose kids walk to school, and then you've got to turn right, and at there it's a really wide junction, and there is a big sort of triangular shaped island in the middle that allows the kids to cross on their way to school. That will be extremely tight for any kind of large plant coming in there. Our understanding is that that would have to be reduced or removed in order for them to get down onto the Hawthorne Road, where the access into the development site will take place. Now, that's my understanding of it. It makes absolute sense to me, having driven on that road for the last 43 years, that it will be extremely tight. But it also concerns me that we haven't got that level of detail at this point when we're asking people to make significant decisions that will impact on our lives and our ability to get our kids to school over a long period of time.
can I respond to that? Sorry. Yeah, so as I explained before, the construction traffic isn't entering the village, so it's not getting to that point.
That's what you stated in your planning application.
I'm sorry, but that's patently not true. The construction...
Sorry, can we just let them speak, please? Sorry.
So and this will be confirmed in the construction traffic management plan, which will be a condition, but the intention is that the construction traffic will come from the A19 and then across to the west, along the A180 and up from the south. So it will stop there and not enter further into the village. There will be emergency vehicles which access the site from West Lane to the north, but they will be smaller vehicles and not HGV vehicles related to the construction.
Thank you, Matthew. Dave, I believe you've got some information on about the island removal, please. Thank you.
Yeah, obviously, in terms of the track on the vehicle that's being used is a 16.5 metre length Arctic, and that's tracked in and out of the site. Now, obviously, the category of roads both serving each access could easily accommodate that size of vehicle, and obviously vehicles passing through any island. So, as I say, I don't see any issue. The control measures can be put in under the construction management plan, the routing plan, and the measures can obviously be checked by highways, and all routes will check to see where they go, and they can avoid peak periods for schools as well, the times for when children's crossing. So we can put measures in within the construction management plan to avoid those times for when they're doing undertaking construction works.
Thank you, Dave. I think basically to answer with Councillor Wilkes' question, looking into this, it wasn't actually a removal of an island. It seems like they're more concerned about the traffic cutting the corner going over an island. So I hope that answers your question on that one. As it looks like there's no further questions, I'd like to open the debate to the committee, please.
Yeah, just from myself, I'd just like to say I'm very concerned about the bunding and the allowing the process to go through without the committee having full access to what is going to go ahead with that. I'm aware of processes where battery systems have burnt out in other countries to the point where they're actually getting transported down to Teesside at the moment to be buried in hazardous waste sites because there's other places that they can't get them, and the impact that it has having tried to cool those systems down, cool, you know, any spread of that. And I'm quite concerned that we haven't got a plan which is going to say where that contaminated water is going to go, how much we're looking at to cool down rather than put out, you know, all these other systems, and how much, you know, that is going to happen on site and what we're then going to do with it. So from a safety point of view, I would like to defer it until we at least get that process through into the committee.
Thank you, Councillor Potts. Yeah, I think with this one, it's quite a hard one as well. Looking at it, you know, we've got environmental impacts with fire as well. We can have a normal impact to our nature and everything else, wildlife impacts, impacts to the residents, and there's not enough information there to keep the residents, to make sure, one, they're safe, but also, you know, the impact on the environment, the nature, and everything else is going to be absolutely hit with this one. So I'm quite concerned about that. Councillor Franklin.
Thank you, Chair. Stephen Franklin for Peterlee. I think I support Councillor Potts' idea of deferring it. One main concern that I had was today, being from Peterlee, on local Facebook pages, there's residents posting that today they got their mail for advising about this committee, saying that if they wish to come and be heard at this committee, they should let them know by the deadline, which was yesterday. So I don't think all the residents that would have wanted to be here could make it due to that. Also, with the local area, I know quite well, being East Durham, beautiful rural area, you've got people having that on the doorstep. People use it as a way to escape, getting away from things. You've got a local garden centre there that's used by the elderly every day. I think having that, 10 years for a hedge to grow to hide it within that 10 years, what are the local residents going to be looking at, the effect it's going to have on local businesses in the area. So I'll support to defer it until we have everything we know, all the information.
Councillor Wilkes, do you still want to come in?
I do, yeah. I mean, I'll come on to that in a second. There's always loads of different things you can consider when we're looking at this as to why you might refuse or approve an application. Generally, on the safety aspects, we've heard that in terms of actually having this at this location, it's kind of outside of our remit, if you like. Although I appreciate what Councillor Potts has said. We've got 3B farmland, so that would say you are allowed to develop the site in relation to that. The noise levels are within guidelines. It looks like the highways points that there are not sufficient to refuse the application, which then comes down to the landscape issues, and there are landscape issues here. I'm going to hear what anybody else has to say at the moment. But the one key thing I would like to say in relation to the idea of deferral is that the government has changed the planning laws. In a few months' time, a lot of planning applications won't be coming to committee. They will be decided under delegated. The opportunity to decide this application for councillors is probably today. It may take months for somebody to come back with the additional information. That additional information is apparently going to be conditioned in anyway. So I'm a little bit concerned about the idea of deferral for reasons on either side of the argument of whichever way you would want to support this. I wonder if the planning officer, the legal officer could confirm, if this is left for deferral for several months, is it the type of site where it wouldn't come back to a committee because of the changes that the government have put in place for planning rules? Or would we actually be able to hear it again? Because otherwise there's not much point in deferring it.
Thank you, Chair. I think what the members are referring to is the national scheme of delegations that should be with us in October, which sets out on a national basis for the first time which applications go to committee and which don't. My understanding is that this is a type of application that would still be a committee matter.
Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. After hearing everything that everyone's got to say today, I mean, it's obviously safety is a massive concern, but after listening to what Neil's got to say and reading paragraph 248, we obviously can't consider that today. So, well, we can, we'll lose. So landscape harm is the only real basis we can refuse this on. To be honest, after being at the site today, looking at the 12-metre high buzz bars, and you know, screening's great after 10 years for 6 months of the year, but for the 6 months in the winter, it provides very little screening. Yeah, I think we should maybe recommend this for refusal, but on landscape harm rather than the safety side of it. So that's my recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think as Stephen, the plan manager, said, it's a difficult one for the planning officers to bring to committee on a refusal until we get the new plan in place and policies accordingly, where we can have sort of sites allocated in the plan. What is interesting in this application today is like it's widespread, like sort of got objections like in the hundreds, many hundreds, and also from all the parish councils, the town council. But a big one what stands out for me is the local MP's objection in there. But it's the same as the housing developments, what's coming into committee, which the planning officers are harnessed with the policy, what have you. However, as the local MP is against it, whatever, but it's this government's sort of policies which is putting the enormous pressures on this committee in relation to sort of having to go along with them approvals. And it's the government who needs to change these policies to help local people, local communities, and let the local voice be heard, because without their support, the officers are up against it. But this application before us today, and in fairness to Councillor Rob Potts and the safety aspect, I do get that. because as James rightly says, the landscape harm, regardless of the safety report what comes back, the landscape harm is not going to change, and I would second refusal for this application. Thank you, Chair.
I think as we've got a couple of options here with first and seconders, I'd like to move to the vote. So the first vote will be for deferring this for a later date. And can I please... Oh, sorry, Neil, just want to have a quick...
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just before it's put to the vote, I'd just like to clarify with Councillor Potts in particular exactly what the scope of the information is that's being sought. So you withdrawing that? Yeah, okay.
Okay, so Councillor Eales.
I'll try this one here. Councillor Eales, Aycliffe South. It seems to me that whatever decision we take, we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. So why don't we all go down together fighting this?
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilkes.
I can't dispute the fact that there's landscape harm. We can see that that's the case. It's probably correct in what Councillor Bell says about the only real certain thing that you can put forward as a proposal for refusal. The problem, of course, is that we're supposed to look at the whole application as a whole and compare the positives and the negatives. And if the only negative that we can come up with is the landscape harm, then the reality is that there's a really good chance that if this was to end up going to appeal, there'll probably be that the inspector may well find in favour. So I think whilst I understand that harm, I'm not convinced it's sufficient to vote against the application, but if other councillors have got other additional suggestions in terms of reasoning for refusing this, then I'd be happy to hear that.
Yeah, Councillor Stevenson.
Can we go to the vote, Chair? I think we've kind of...
Chair, before it's put to the vote, I just want to be clear what the reasons that are being advanced for refusal are. So I've obviously heard what Councillor Stevenson said, seconded by Councillor Bell, which was framed particularly around landscape harm. Was there any other harm that you had in mind, or is it purely just landscape?
Councillor Schumann.
I was on the site visit this morning, and the field had been harvested, and judging by the length of straw, it's obvious that field is very productive for food production, and food security must come into our decision making, and therefore I want to put forward that the field is productive farmland, and it would be a waste to put a best site on there.
Thank you, Councillor. I think the panel officer just runs a quick brief on this one.
So whilst the field is being farmed at the moment, it's not actually agricultural best value land, so it wouldn't be in conflict with policy to develop on that land. So I don't think it would really stand up as a reason for refusal, that one.
Chair, just to emphasise, what the planning officer said, I don't think food security would be a sustainable reason for refusal. So I would caution against that as being a factor in the reasons that members will vote on in a moment. If the only reason that it's being advanced, then I think is where we've got to is landscape harm, then ultimately, as Councillor Wilkes has said, it's a balance. And I think what members are therefore saying is that the benefits of the scheme, significant as they are not sufficient to outweigh that landscape harm. And that's ultimately a judgment to be made by members. Now, if you're asking me, would we likely successfully defend that appeal? No, I don't think we would. I think ultimately an inspector would place greater weight on the benefits of this type of development, but I don't think it would be a cost situation either. So ultimately, it's a balance for members. If you do decide to refuse it on the basis that the landscape harm outweighs the benefits, I don't think we'll be successful at appeal, but as I say, I don't think we'd be subject to adverse costs either.
Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On the landscape harm, would to add in visual harm as well, Neil? And the question also to yourself was also if policies 10, 27 and 33 were applicable to refusal.
Yes, thank you for that. I'll pass over to the case officer who's got the policies at our fingertips more than I have in terms of whether they would feed into the harm.
Right, okay. Which policies did you mention again? Sorry. Policy 10. Okay. Yes to 10.
I think we probably could go with all three of them, Louisa.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you
we've got
reckon?
all three I've got with limits if it's all landscape based in the countryside.
Right. Yes, we'd be happy to go with those three policies. Yeah.
As we have a first and a second, I'd like to put this to a vote. So could we please all vote in favour of declining this planning application? Anyone against? Anyone to abstain? No. And that is the planning application minute has been declined, and that is closed this part of the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Chair, can I request a break?
Yeah, just a 5-minute quick break. Moving on to agenda item 5B, can I invite Claire Teasdale, the planning officer, to show her report, please?
Thank you. This is a planning application for the construction and operation of a solar park, together with associated equipment, infrastructure and ancillary works. It's a cross-boundary site, lying partly within County Durham and partly within Sunderland. And as such, identical planning applications have been submitted to Durham County Council and to the City of Sunderland Council. Planning permissions for both applications would be required for the development to be undertaken. The officer report assesses the development as a whole against Durham and Sunderland development plan policies, but it is for Sunderland to make a judgment on its own policies when determining the application to make to it that has been made to it, as we will do in terms of the application made to Durham. Oops. In terms of committee updates, I have to inform the committee that yesterday afternoon, the appellant informed officers that they were submitting an appeal against non-determination of this application and the one to Sunderland. And that submission would be made yesterday. As we have not received notification from the Planning Inspectorate that a valid appeal has been submitted, it is considered that we can proceed with determination of the application. Any subsequent issue would be dealt with at appeal. It is extremely disappointing that this decision was made the day before this committee meeting. However, going forward with determination of the application, I'd like to advise committee of a few updates since publication of the report last week. An objector has provided clarification with regarding concerns raised about the impact upon Lord Byron's Walk Cemetery. Objections have been received from councillors Andrew Harrison and Chris Vars of Seaham Division, and these updates will be detailed later in the presentation. The report at paragraph 329 refers to Sunderland City Council reconsulting with Lichfield regarding a glint and glare assessment, and I've been informed by Sunderland City Council that Lichfield have provided a further response which concludes that the scheme is likely to generate low levels of glint and glare across all assessed receptor groups, with the proposed additional landscape mitigation further reducing any potential impacts. The site is located to the north of Seaham and to the south of Ryhope and comprises open arable land in Durham and land used for horse grazing in the City of Sunderland. The eastern part of the site is within County Durham, and the western part of the site is within Sunderland, the black line being the county boundary. The application site is described in paragraphs 7 to 18 of the officer report and highlights relevant features and designations. Of particular note is that the site as a whole is located within the Greenbelt. An area of higher landscape value abuts the site to the north, east and the majority of the southern boundary of that part of the site within Durham. The defined heritage coast, so the HLV comes down here and around here. The defined heritage coast and wider coastal zone lie to the east of the road B1287, and that's down here. Ryhope Dean Local Wildlife Site and Cherry Knoll Dean Local Wildlife Site with ancient and semi-natural woodland are partly located within and adjacent to the application site, and national and international conservation designations along the coast are further distant. This is just a plan, the same site boundary obviously, showing the aerial. Within County Durham, the closest properties are at Grangemount, which is just here. Properties at Seaham Grange are here, and properties at the Glebe Estate, which is just down here to the southwest. The closest residential properties in Sunderland are Pont Cottage and West Cherry Knoll Farm, which are in this location here. The owner of Pond Cottage is here today to address the planning committee. This is a plan showing the site layout, and the proposal is described in paragraphs 19 to 34 of the officer report. The arrays of solar panels would be arranged in rows mounted on metal frames, with the panels having a maximum height of 2.66 metres, and these would be spaced to avoid shadowing effects, with topography dictating exact row spacing. The site would have a perimeter security fencing with CCTV and maintenance access. Equipment to support the generation of electricity would be located across the site, accessible by internal tracks. An on-site substation would be located in the northwest of the site, within the Sunderland area, again just where the cursor is. Oops. The grid connection would be via the proposed substation to the existing 66 kV overhead pylon. Cabling would link the solar modules, inverters and the substation. There's 3 proposed options for underground cable links included in the application for the linking of that part of the site within County Durham to the substation. There would be separate accesses to the eastern and western parts of the site. The eastern part of the site would be accessed off the A1018 in County Durham, and the western part off Burradon Lane in Sunderland, which is also a bridleway. The development would have an installed capacity of circa 48 megawatts and be operational for 40 years from the date of first exportation of electricity. Construction would take approximately 12 months, and at the end of the operational period, the site would be fully decommissioned and restored, and decommissioning is expected to take 18 months. This is a plan showing the proposed landscaping, and this would comprise of native tree and hedgerow planting, including infilling of existing hedge gaps to filter views and provide biodiversity enhancement. The next few slides are photographs, with the top slide showing the site as existing, the middle one being the site with the solar development, and then the third one being the same view after 15 years of having undertaken landscaping and then 15 years of growth. So this view is from the National Cycle Route, northeast of West Cherry Knoll Farm and Pond Cottage. So this is part of the site within Sunderland. And Pond Cottage, where the lady who's going to speak today lives, is in this area here. So from this, as I say, you can see no solar panels. You can see the solar panels here, and then this is a photo montage showing the proposed planting in 15 years. This is another one. Members that were on the site visit this morning were stopped at this point, but I'm sure you're all aware of this particular road. This is the B1287, the coast road. We'll have the coast over to this side here. The way that the photo montages have been done here are actually 2 separate, and what I've done is sort to align them to just have a panorama that sort of gives the range of the site. So again, this along the top, no solar panels. Along here, you can see the solar panels just on this ridge, and here with the planting. As you can see, planting after 15 years doesn't necessarily hide all of the panels. This is a view from Lord Byron's Walk towards the south of the site. Again, no panels, with panels, and then with 15 years worth of planting. In terms of consultations and representations, these are set out in paragraphs 55 to 115 of the officer report, along with details of the publicity undertaken. And as I said earlier, we've also assessed against City of Sunderland policies, and we've also included consultee responses that they've had to their application, so that you have a full appreciation, and so we consider the development as a whole. Within the majority of statutory and internal consultees do not object to either application, subject to conditions where appropriate. The exception being Seaham Town Council, who objects, and the Heritage Coast Partnership, who does not support the Durham application. Durham County Council's landscape section has identified harm to the character, quality and distinctiveness of the landscape and the area of higher landscape value. This would be moderate major initially in relation to the site and the immediate area. eventually reducing progressively to moderate overall with the establishment of appropriate and sufficiently robust landscape mitigation. The moderate major level of land of impact would be for a substantial period, around 15 years, and this would also hold in winter months for the operational period. So basically this is that the landscaping, as you saw before, may not sort of hide all of the panels, but for approximately 6 months of the year, that planting that would be in front of them wouldn't be green. It would, you know, sort of obviously sort of like in the winter, there's not going to be any leaves on it. Obviously, sort of spring, autumn, you're going to grow, you're going to fall. And so it's considered that this moderate major across the site would hold for that period of time. The number of representations received from the public are set out in the report and they're on the slide. In respect to the Durham application, there's been 16 objections and 79 letters of support. There have also been 14 objections to the Sunderland application and 79 support. A summary of the issues raised by objectors and supporters are included in the officer report, with representations being able to be viewed online in full. Objections received from the members of the public, including the East Durham Action Group and CPRE, again are detailed in the report, but they're summarised on the slide and include a loss of agricultural land, ecology, impact on the green belt, landscape and visual impacts, residential amenity, cumulative impact, as well as other matters included in the officer report. As mentioned earlier, an objector has provided clarification regarding the concerns raised about the impact on Lord Byron's Walk Cemetery in response to paragraph 501 of the officer report. I am advised, as I say, this has come from the objector, and I've agreed that I would read this out to you, that the cemetery is of regional significance as the first purpose-built green cemetery in the northeast. Thousands of trees are planted on the cemetery site and serve as an extension of the Great North Forest towards the coast. The planting and establishment was co-funded by the Forestry Authority. The current cemetery site is 1/6 of its eventual planned area and will cater for the town's burial needs for the next 100 years. All of the land is under the ownership of Seaham Town Council. The cemetery was chosen as it sits in greenbelt land and sits well in the designation. A solar farm would be a major visual intrusion on the environment with a semi-industrial use close to the cemetery. Also, as I mentioned earlier, objections have now been received from Durham County Councillors Ferrers and Harrison, raising similar issues as previously mentioned, but also including impact on heritage assets, ecology, coalescence and urbanisation of the countryside, alternatives and site selection, food security, drainage and flood risk, and impact on the character of the approach to the town. In terms of support, matters raised by members of the public include general support for green energy, employment opportunities, investment for the local community. The concerns raised by objectors, I must say, have been considered in the officer report, as you will have seen. The development has been carefully assessed in terms of its location, operation and appearance, and the impacts of the development upon a variety of matters as set out in the officer report. Where harm has been identified, this must be weighed in the planning balance. The benefits of renewable energy are fully recognised and acknowledged. These include addressing climate change, developing a secure, reliable, affordable, net zero energy generating system. And there is a grid connection, and that would make an early and material contribution to achieving local and national objectives relating to climate change and result in a reduction in CO2 emissions over the life of the site. And as officers, we acknowledge that this benefit attracts significant weight. The other benefits include economic benefits, employment during construction, and biodiversity and landscape improvements, and we do give these moderate weight to these benefits. And these benefits that I've just mentioned are also comment to the very special circumstances which has been forwarded in support of the application in respect of development in the Greenbelt. However, in this case, officers consider that the proposal would result in an unacceptable harm to the character, quality and distinctiveness of the landscape and the area of higher landscape value, which includes the landscape and setting of the designated heritage coast, and would not provide an acceptable standard of residential amenity due to unacceptable impact through visual intrusion and visual dominance. Having weighed this harm in the planning balance, it is not considered that the benefits outweigh the harm and that the proposal would be contrary to development plan policy. In addition, the proposal we consider would be inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, which in itself is harmful and would also cause significant harm to the openness and integrity of a particularly vulnerable part of the Greenbelt, which in this location plays an important role in separating and avoiding encroachment and sprawl. And again, it's considered that the benefits of the proposal do not clearly outweigh this harm, and as such, very special circumstances have not been met on this occasion. Taking all matters, taking all material considerations into account, including the representations received, officers consider that the proposed development is contrary to the development plan and that there are no material planning considerations indicating otherwise. Therefore, this application is therefore recommended for refusal, set out for the reasons set out in paragraph 537 of the officer report. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. We have one speaker today, and that's an objector, and that is from a resident called Celia Wright. Can I please remind you have 5 minutes to speak?
Thank you. Yes, my name's Celia Wright, and my husband and I live at Pond Cottage, which Claire's outlined on the slide. We obviously live within the Sunderland planning application area, but not from the County Durham boundary and the NCN1 cycle route. We object to the solar farm as it will have a monumental impact on our lives. Firstly, from a personal perspective, the reasons are as follows. Our house and surrounding garden will have solar panels on 3 sides of our property boundary. We will be surrounded. Panels in places will only be 30 to 40 metres from our boundary. We spend a lot of time in the garden and have a vegetable allotment. The panels will literally be just over the fence. Current studies advise there should be at least a minimum distance of 200 metres, and for bigger farms, up to 2k from residential properties. The current plan to surround our property with panels will result in us looking out from our windows and garden onto a sea of metal. Our house will become unsellable, or at best devalued. Who wants to live on top of a solar farm? If I asked anyone here, I expect the answer would be no. We are retired and can no longer apply for a mortgage in order to move away. The impact from the glint and glare of the panels is disputable, with reports providing conflicting data. Our house looks directly onto the panels, so potentially will seriously impact our outlook. No one will be sure about the impact, and once the farm is built, it's too late. There's also no data produced to assess our personal health impacts, both physically and mentally. Secondly, we live there because we love the environment. There will be a huge impact on nature and the green belt, including a detrimental impact on urban sprawl. The solar farm will almost totally eradicate the green belt that now exists between Seaham and Sunderland. Reports suggest a huge impact on wildlife and nature, and yet we are not utilising opportunities so we can retain green space. There is considerable house building near to us currently, and very few have solar panels. Why are we covering green fields when there are numerous opportunities for solar panels to be fitted onto buildings, or e.g. over car parks? thank you for listening. Obviously, for my husband and I, this solar farm is deeply personal. I can't read the other bit. Just change.
That's it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Celia. Can I just please open the up to committee members for questions? Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask, David, how far away is this from the Heritage Coast?
In terms of exact metres, it's within half a kilometre. You know, I would estimate. Is that right, Claire?
Yeah, because the Heritage Coast, so the road comes down here, and the Heritage Coast is just, yeah, sorry, I'm just, you can see where the lines for the car boot sale are, and the road comes down here, and the Heritage Coast comes, like down here. So it's immediately to the east of the road.
Yeah. So it's ranging at the top between it's sort of the boundary of the railway line and the road. So the site is at the boundary of the railway line, the East Coast Railway Line. That's the eastern boundary, and the gap between that and the Coast Road, the B1287, gets wider. It starts at say 50 metres, 100, and then it gets gradually wider, probably to about a half kilometre as you get south. But it is indivisible. You will be able to see the site from there.
Thank you. Another question, might be more for, I'm not sure, but I know we spent a lot of money on our beautiful coastline. Do we have a rough idea of what kind of money we've spent on tourism for down there, and obviously the visual impact that's going to have on those tourists?
I don't have a figure to hand, Chair, but Councillor Stevenson's right. For a period of in excess of 20-25 years, there's been a number of initiatives that the council and regional partners have funded, to get to what I think is a very strong position in terms of tourism where we are at present, with hopefully more opportunities to come. But in terms of a figure, I'm sorry I don't have that to hand.
Councillor Potts.
Yeah, can I just confirm that you did say it's going to take at least 15 years for it to cover the view of the panels, and even then 6 months a year they're probably still going to impact on the view of the area?
Yes, because normally, David can correct us, normally it takes planting about 15 years to, reach a decent height. And what the concern is that obviously, these panels are going to be about 2.66 metres high. There's going to be other planting equipment associated with it around the site as well. But even within the 15 years, as we saw in the photographs, that it doesn't necessarily cover everything. And then also there's this impact that, when you haven't got leaves on a hedgerow or whatever, you can see through. And this is something that our landscape team have identified that, can be for approximately 6 months of the year. So, for 6 months of the year during the operational period, it'll be green and it will cover quite a bit. But then in those autumn and winter months when, it's lost the leaves, you will be able to see these views in, and obviously anything that's higher.
Just one more quick one, Chair. With regards to, I know it says there's going to be a bonus with regards to jobs and employment. From what I've seen of the big ones that are happening over our way, that happens for the first part while people are putting those solar panels up. But then you actually don't see anybody on site after 12, 18 months. It's just basically an empty site. I take when they're talking about employment, that is only the initial building of the site, and then there'll be nothing after that.
It's like a lot of construction sites. Do you know what I mean? You get the construction employment at the beginning. This one, they've said it'll take about 12 months. So obviously, they will be employing people for that period. During the operational period, they're not manned. So, there may be obviously people coming for maintenance. So it'll be, they'll have a maintenance regime as to how many times they send people to do it. But then there's also the decommissioning phase whereby everything will get removed at the end. So that's going to be, you know, another employment opportunity then.
As it looks like there's no more questions, I'd like to open the floor up for debate. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bell. All right, come. Go ahead, Councillor Bell.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it'd be criminal to build solar farm in this area, and I credit to you, Claire, for bringing this report forward for a refusal. You know, if they don't want to farm this area, the next best thing would be tourism, because it's absolutely a stunning area. And if we put solar farms on there, it would just destroy it. It is disappointing, I have to agree with you, that the applicant, you know, couldn't wait another day to come to committee. But at the same time, it's not surprising, considering like, the way sort of like some of the appeals have been going, and the sort of the national policy sort of view on such applications. But I wish you luck on it, Claire, and I would happily go along with the officer's recommendation to refuse this application. Thank you, Chair.
I think there's going to be a bit of a reckoning at some point in future, because, I mean, this is going to be, what, 80 hectares of farmland. We've just refused an application for 1/10 of that, which would secure 4 times the amount of energy coming in off the North Sea. The reality is that there's going to be some cumulative impacts come along on the East Coast, and we have to make a decision. Do we want huge areas of green belt, which basically separate Seaham from Sunderland? There's a reason it's greenbelt there. Do we want to be building on that at 10 times the area, or do we want some battery storage to take all of that offshore wind, which we're paying for even if it's not produced at the moment? The sensible option is to say, going forward, we have the battery storage systems because of the 4 gigawatts of energy that's going to come in. And if you look at this, it's 48 megawatts of energy. Let's get the 4 gigawatts in and store that, and then we can use that the following day. And let's not rip up the green belt and merge what is 2 towns together. So yeah, I'll second Councillor Bell on that.
Councillor Eales.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. Am I right in thinking that eventually this was supposed to feed into the previous planning application at Hawthorne? Am I right in thinking that?
This is a separate development.
Obviously, there'd be developments in between. Now, we seem to have 2 separate things here. I mean, the first one we were considering, everyone seems to be opposed to it. This one, everyone seems to be for it. But if you look at the figures, we have 79 people supporting it in the Durham area, and 79 people supporting it in the Sunderland area. Seems a bit odd to me, that, but we'll go with that. Also, if you look at page 103, it's in the Sunderland part of their development plans. If you look on page 37, there's a bit of an error in there. Now, I haven't been through every one. It doesn't seem to have been put together all that cleverly.
I'll just come back on the what you're saying about number of representations in terms of, you know, you're sort of highlighting the difference that there's more letters of support rather than letters of objection that has been made both to Durham and to Sunderland. That is the case. When I looked at the nature of the letters of support, they're all a pro forma letter, which basically has, they must have been generated for the applicant by a company, and they're set out saying with the title of the application, and they're asking people whether they're for or against the development. And people have, you know, ticked a box and some of them have put a comment, some as simple as "I'm for green energy." What I didn't mention, because I think I've had 3, but there's been 3 people that sort of rang me up and said that they don't recall actually, you know, sending anything. So when we've notified them about committee, they've been at a little bit of a loss. However, I think some of them perhaps, you know, been caught at a shopping centre, to be quite honest. But I think, you know, the letters that we have received from objection, like Mrs. Wright, they've articulated what the reasons are in terms of why they object to the proposed planning application. And just your other point, I'm not quite clear what you meant, but the way that we've sort of put in the report, we've sought to, as I've stated in the report, assess the application against Durham and Sunderland policies. And so that's just been our interpretation with a broad brush approach, just to see how it fits together. But ultimately, you know, we've come to the conclusion that we as Durham officers recommend refusal on Durham policies.
Councillor Stevenson.
Can you just remind me, we've already been told that the applicant is going to, when this is refused, they're going to appeal. Is that right?
They notified us yesterday that they have already appealed against non-determination, because planning applications, there's a specified time period as to how long you've got to determine an application unless an applicant agrees an extension of time. This applicant agreed an extension of time with ourselves and Sunderland until the 3rd of June, but no further extension of time has been agreed. So what they've ended up doing is, you know, well, they've told us that they've appealed to the Planning Inspectorate the day before this committee against non-determination, because we don't currently have an extension of time in place with them.
I understand that. I know you have a very difficult job.
Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. All my points I was going to make have kind of already been said, really, but I mean, for me, with how close it is to the Heritage Coast, with the coalescence of Sunderland and Seaham, you know, just the landscape harm for the area, really. I'd also like to support Alan Bell's recommendation for refusal, and obviously the officer's recommendation as well.
Thank you. As we have a first proposal and a seconder to go with the officer's recommendation, I think we're ready to put it to the vote. Can I have vote all in favour for going with the officer's recommendation of refusal? That's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Chair, could you excuse me? I've got a...
Moving on to agenda item 5C, can I ask Laura to present to committee?
Hello. So yes, this is agenda item 5C. It's for the proposed removal of condition 10, which relates to an off-site highways improvement scheme pursuant to an earlier grant of planning permission at land to the northeast of Explorer House, Iverston Lane, Iveston. So this is the site location plan with the main site outlined in red. So this is the main site here, and that benefits from planning permission for 288 dwellings. This current application, as I referred to earlier, is actually for the removal of a particular condition associated with that, which sought to deliver off-site highways improvement works at the junction of Delves Lane and Gloucester Road roundabout, which was supposed to be delivered prior to the occupation of the 113th dwelling. The red circle here indicates the location of that junction, and this is just a more detailed blown up plan of that for members' benefit. So this is an aerial photograph of those plans that I showed you previously, and it just shows you the surrounding road arrangement. So here are some photographs of the site. The left-hand image is an aerial image taken from Google Earth, and it shows the roundabout arrangement as it was last year. It's a painted roundabout with 3 single-lane approach arms, and it's acknowledged at that time the white lining was quite worn and faded. The image on the right is just been taken within the last week, and it shows that the lining has been freshly repainted. The image on the right is taken from the south, looking north up towards the roundabout. So the left-hand image is taken from the north, looking back down to the south, and the final image on the right-hand side is looking southwest across the roundabout. So the plan to the left shows the roundabout improvement scheme, and an annotated version of that same plan is shown on the right-hand side. So basically, the roundabout improvement scheme showed road widening to the eastern parts of the carriageway, so these bits here, and also and that was to enable a second approach to each lane of the roundabout, but the roundabout would have still been just a painted one. So in terms of consultations and representations, the Highways Authority have raised no objection to the proposed removal of the condition. In terms of advertising this application, we've advertised it by means of press notices and local site notices. In response to that, we've received 2 letters of objection from local residents on the ground of highway safety. We've also received 2 comments of representation, which were supportive of the removal of the condition in favour of an enhanced mitigation proposal, but it's just to note that this is not what the application is seeking. It's just the pure removal of the condition with no mitigation scheme secured. We've also received representation from Councillor Kenny Hope of the Delves Lane Division, who objects to the application as he considers the roundabout to be extremely dangerous. There are regular road traffic collisions. Residents have raised concerns with him directly, that developers should not, be able to get out of the obligations that were originally imposed upon them, and feels that the application should be called a committee for members to determine. I do apologise, sorry. So planning applications are required to be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. This application seeks an amendment to a development which already has planning permission and the principle of development has been established. The development site is well under construction with multiple properties already occupied. The matter before committee today is the removal of this condition 10 for the off-site highway improvement works and the compliance with relevant planning policy in that regard. The Highway Authority is satisfied that the most up-to-date survey data is representative and that modelling approach is robust. The assessment indicates that the mini roundabout will continue to operate within acceptable capacity thresholds, and as such no material capacity issues have been identified that would justify the delivery of the previously secured improvement works. The removal of the condition would not be prejudicial to highway safety or have a severe residual impact on the network capacity, and as such there would be no policy conflict with the County Durham Plan Policy 6, 10 and 21 or Part 9 of the MPPF. As you'll see within the report, amendments were also proposed to a number of other conditions, and that's just to kind of reflect the works that have been undertaken on site and ensure the proposal aligns with the wider permission. So in conclusion, taking all material considerations into account and including those raised by interested parties, the scheme is considered to comply with the County Durham Plan when read as a whole and should be approved without delay in accordance with paragraph 11C of the MPPF. There are no material considerations indicating otherwise, therefore the application is recommended for approval subject to the relevant conditions as outlined in the report and as rationalised. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. We have one speaker today, and that is Councillor Hope, who is a local member, and he objects. And please remind you, you do not have a time, but please keep it within reason. Thank you, Councillor Hope.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Kenny Hope from the Delves Lane Division. I'm here with Councillor Teasdale, who also objects to this application in the removal of Condition 10 in relation to DM/24/0320/VOC. I know it's been a long day, so I'll rattle through it as quickly as I possibly can for you. I've just been watching things out there, and I do appreciate that. So, this is not about delaying development. The housing development has already commenced. Families have moved into their new homes and nobody is questioning the principle of development. The question before us today is much simpler. Should this committee remove a highway safety condition that was originally considered necessary to make this development acceptable? I believe the answer should be no. When planning permissions were originally granted, Condition 10 required improvements to the Delves Lane and Gloucester Road roundabout because the council recognised that mitigation was necessary to accommodate the impact of the developments. Today, we are being asked to remove that safeguard. The report relies heavily on updated traffic modelling, which concludes that the junction has sufficient capacity. But the capacity is not the same as safety. Delves Lane is far more than a residential road. It is one of the principal transport routes between Consett in Durham City and Consett, Newcastle and Gateshead in Sunderland, and carries a significant volume of commuter, commercial and heavy goods traffic throughout the day. Can we see? Yep. If you look at exhibits 1 to 3 above there, you will see clearly there the dot and the size of it in correspondence with the vehicles that are on there. It also serves as major local employers and business, including Elders Transport, Irwin Heimer, and 2 large motorhome and caravan storage facilities. This means the route experience a mix of private cars, commercial vehicles, delivery vehicles, caravans, motorhomes, HGVs, and farm vehicles, creating a traffic environment that is much more complex than traffic modelling alone can determine. Can we see exhibits 4 to 6, please, Laura? I don't know if members can read that there, but I'll come on to it in, more in a bit. As someone who travels the route regularly, I see firsthand how busy this junction is, and I also store my own caravan in one of the storage facilities, so I know firsthand the challenges of navigating the current roundabout. Residents contact me frequently about collisions and near misses, and on Monday, when I was at the site taking the photographic evidence that I'm providing today, an employee from the garage across the road from the roundabout asked us what I was doing, and I explained to him, and I told him what I was doing. He says, something needs to be done, because I get people in here daily asking if our CCTV reaches that roundabout. It doesn't, so, you know, they've got to then obviously go through the insurance without that evidence. Many of these incidents never appear on official collision statistics because they are resolved through insurance companies without the police involvement. This means the data before us may not tell the whole story. Planning decisions should certainly be based on evidence, but they should also recognise the lived experience of the communities we represent. I would also ask members to carefully consider the public representations supporting the removal of Condition 10. Only 2 residents expressed support. It is my understanding that they believed the application related to improvements to the roundabout rather than removing of an existing highway mitigation measure. I say that because I made exactly the same mistake when I first read the application. I genuinely believed that it was an application for a much needed highway improvement, and I even shared it on social media because I thought residents would welcome those improvements. In August last year, Stephen Reid, I emailed Stephen Reid. I was told only 3 months into the post that the 2 developments had put Section 106 money in to get this roundabout sorted. I asked Steve if that was the case, but I also asked multiple questions. That question was never answered, so I thought, well, it mustn't be. But I would have liked to have had a reply from somebody to say that, there is conditions that's been put in that this is going to happen, so that I could share with the residents who were continually complaining to myself and Jackie regarding that. So it was only when I read the papers in greater detail that I realised I had misunderstood the application. And this is not an application to improve the junction, it is an application to remove a condition that would require those improvements to be delivered. I'm more than happy to admit my mistake. However, it demonstrates just how easily this application can be misunderstood, and therefore believe the committee should be cautious about placing significant weight on those 2 representations. On Friday the 5th of June 2026, it's on Exhibit 5, you can't really see it there, application DM 26/00572/VOC was put in regarding the same roundabout. Could I ask an officer to explain to me what this removal of Condition 36 actually was, please? Because I can't make head and hair of it, to be honest.
So what you're referring to is that there's been multiple planning applications in the Concert area. So what happened is that the Millers scheme, which is the one under consideration today, came forward at a very similar time to a Persimmon scheme, which is in the Templetown area. There was also a Project Genesis application in the system. So Millers and Persimmon had the same transport consultant milestone. They worked together, they did a cumulative assessment of, several junctions within the Concert area. I think there was maybe about 8 in total. 4 were found to be operating within capacity, so no work was required, but 4 needed improvement works. So essentially both developers had the same conditions imposed upon them both, albeit with slightly different triggers. So fast forward, Persimmon have came in to remove the same condition, so it's condition 36 on their planning permission, whereas on the Millers approval it's condition 10. So the Persimmon scheme, the removal of this exact same condition securing the exact same work, that argument's already been accepted under delegated powers, and that scheme has been approved. Does that answer?
So, in a nutshell, these 2 developers put in planning applications. Their conditions were put in for both applications of different developers to then make sure that these safety measures were put in place at the time. So not just one developer, 2 developers was put in, and now these have both come in to withdraw that. Can I, obviously that was approved by delegated powers on the 5th, can I now, or is there any scope for me then to appeal that decision?
Thank you, Chair. No, in answer to that question, there's no scope for an appeal by a third party such as yourself, Councillor. only legal remedy would be judicial review, but clearly there'd have to be sufficient grounds, and I would say it would be very unusual for a serving member of the council to be judicially reviewing a council decision in that regard.
So could I ask if stuff as in, applications is important to this, to a community, is put to members in a more, reader, usable, way? Because these conditions, when you look at the planning itself, is quite complex. Now, as a member, I think it would be right that I would be told, right, this developer is taking away that from your area, do you see where I'm coming from? Because when I look at that stuff, it's just a load of garbage, legal stuff. It's not like these are taking away that. The removal of condition this, where do you go to you know what I mean? You have to jump through hoops and all of that sort of stuff to be able to understand it properly. That's what I'm saying. I'm not a thick guy, but I think it needs to be more user-friendly for members to be able to understand. So if we could look at that, that would be absolutely fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so local residents have become so familiar with the junction, you've given it a nickname. They call it the Dot. We can see, can we see exhibits 7, 8 and 8, please, Laura? That's the Dot itself. That's it there. Unfortunately, the nickname has become associated with the behaviour that demonstrates the existing design. It's not always encouraging safe driving. Residents regularly report that some drivers use the painted mini roundabout to perform burnouts, handbrake turns, and simply drive straight across it instead of negotiating it correctly. The first photographs before members today evidences that behaviour. Whether every incident is formally recorded or not, those reports demonstrate that the existing layout does not command the level of driver behaviour what we should expect from the junction carrying this volume of traffic. Can we see exhibits 9 to 16, please, Laura? I also know from first-hand experience the maintenance problems caused by this current layout. I waited nearly a year for the potholes around the mini roundabout to be repaired and for the road markings to be reinstalled after complaints from residents. The markings are quickly worn away because many vehicles simply just drive straight over the Dot rather than around it and at speed. I think there's video footage, Laura. I think if you just try and find that there. So the image on the left-hand side there is before the Dot was reinstated, but you can clearly see people just driving from left to right, going straight over the Dot itself. Cars can navigate this easily. HGVs, buses and all of that sort of stuff don't. But this junction itself, once them road markings are gone, people just think that it's not there and they just drive and crack on straight across it, just like that car there, which to me causes a massive issue. Highway Code Rule 188, many roundabouts approach these in the same way as a normal roundabout. All vehicles must pass around central markings except large vehicles which are physically incapable of doing so. Remember, there is less space to manoeuvre and less time to signal. Avoid making U-turns at many roundabouts before others doing this. The laws. Road Traffic Act 1988, Section 36. The Traffic Signs Regulations and General Directions 2002 Regulations 10.1 and 16.1. If the roundabout cannot retain its basic road markings because of the way it is routinely driven over, that should tell us something about whether the current design is fit for purpose. Repeatedly repairing potholes and repainting road markings that are rapidly worn away is not a good use of taxpayers' money. Removing Condition 10 would simply perpetuate the cycle of ongoing maintenance and avoidable expense, which is not in the best interest of the public purse or County Durham. The original condition recognises that improvements were needed. The question we should ask ourselves today is simple. Has the junction itself become safer from when the applications were approved? Or have we just been presented with a new traffic model? Can we see Exhibit 17, please, Laura? I was only there for 10 minutes, and this was at 12:30 during the day, and I snapped them. There's, you know, this was on a Monday as well, a working day. During holidays and all of that sort of stuff, the traffic is up even higher. And as you can see there, people just cracking on, not looking left and right, just straight on across, and there's multiple vehicles on that roundabout at the same time. The National Plan and Policy Framework requires developments to provide safe and suitable access for all users. That obligation goes beyond traffic capacity. It includes protecting motorists, pedestrians, cyclists, and everybody using that highway network. If there is genuine uncertainty over whether removing this condition could compromise safety, then I believe we should err on the side of caution. Once this condition is removed, the opportunity to secure these improvements through this planning permission is effectively lost. If in 2 or 3 years' time serious collisions continue, or worse, someone seriously injured, residents will rightly ask why this committee removed a highway improvement that had already been secured. Our responsibility is not simply to keep traffic moving. Our responsibility is to make our roads as safe as reasonably possible. The financial costs of delivering these improvements can be calculated. The human cost of getting this decision wrong can't. Chair, I respectfully ask members to reject this application to remove condition 10. Let us retain the mitigation that this council originally considered necessary. Protect the public purse from repeated maintenance costs, and above all, demonstrate the safety of our residents will always come first. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Councillor Hope. Laura, is there anything you want to come back on that one first?
So just for clarification, the improvement scheme that we previously secured was just another painted roundabout situation. So there was no kind of physical central island. So just some of the queries about maintenance, that would still persist. And I think Dave will obviously jump in and explain it better than myself, but this is a capacity issue, so the junction was being widened for capacity rather than highway safety reasons. The original survey data was done pre-COVID in association with a different development scheme. It was a Gleeson scheme in Gloucester Road. Gloucester Road, and basically what's happened is that Persimmon and Millers have asked their transport consultant Milestone to update all the survey data, and based on that there isn't a change, and that they don't think the highway mitigation is required.
Dave, do you want to make a couple of comments on this one, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, did you want to speak? All right, sorry. Yeah, obviously I appreciate the concerns of Councillor Hope in regard to the roundabout improvement, and that he probably feels that the developers reneged on doing that. But obviously for us as a highway authority, we have to look at transport assessments and data. It's obviously when you're looking at a transport assessment, it's data, evidence, and technical lead. And the current roundabout was designed to CD 116 highway design standards, so it was designed as a single lane approach. Those mitigation measures for the two-lane approach were part of a capacity assessment, which is not really needed now. The applicants employed a transport consultant, and the modelling was based on 2025 surveys, and for a full cumulative development growth to 2040. So basically, I don't want to get into modelling, but the roundabout will operate well within acceptable capacity thresholds. So 0.85 is where a junction would reach, become under stress. Now the developer has looked at the ADTs and the peak hours, so we do our assessments on peak hour only. So the capacity assessments done on peak hour only. And we've looked at the peak hour scenario and compared it to historic data along Delves Lane, and there wasn't much changes in the historic data because obviously you had a pre-COVID modelling scenario that was done, and it obviously didn't pick up now where people are hybrid working, flexible working, basically the peak hour rates remain sort of static, so the capacity intervention is not really needed. In terms of its operation, it'll operate this very similar to because it's just going to be a spot island, so you will get some overrunning of the spot island still. And obviously, in terms of accident stats, we can only work on accident data, which is if there's any collisions or any trends or any thing that raise any concerns. But on this roundabout, there's only been one minor accident in 5 years, so that shows that in effect it operates okay and safely. I hear what the member was saying about damage-only accidents, but obviously that's just anecdotal evidence, and that we wouldn't take that. A planning inspector would basically just look at the 5-year accident history and say that there's one minor done in 5 years, and he would look at basically the fact that it operates to 2040 under capacity thresholds. So, and the modelling's there, the data's there, and everything's sort of, as I say, we cannot really obviously raise a highways argument against it. So, unfortunately, yes, I understand where the member's coming from, but on technical grounds, we would lose a plan appeal.
Councillor Hope.
Thank you, Chair. So you say there's one minor accident on there. I totally dispute that. I know multiple individuals who've had accidents on there. Just because they haven't went to the police, it doesn't mean that they haven't had a minor accident. That is, the modelling is wrong. I see what you're getting at, and that's what we'll have to work off. But this is a safety issue. This safety issue is what, my real concerns are. Since COVID, less people are using public transport and buses. That is a fact. The data's out there. So, people are using the cars more now. So that capacity on that highway has been increased since COVID. There has been a call for land just recently, which I've seen. There's 3 plots of land within Delves Lane that have been called. It hasn't been agreed as of yet. It needs to come to Cabinet for 3 big developments within Delves Lane. That there is going to increase the capacity of Delves Lane again. The fact that we are a commuter town and the fact that people use that road daily and a lot, and I use it daily myself, and I see these incidents all the time in near misses. That is the evidence. That is real-time evidence. Facts, figures on a bit of paper are not always the evidence. I could go there and I could spend a day there with a drone recording, and I would probably pick up 3 or 4 minor misses, near misses, or potential minor accidents.
Councillor Hope, can I just move it on to questions for the committee, please? Just to share reason for is a lot of that is in the future planning, which we cannot talk about. And the second thing is, officers can only use data they're given. They cannot use evidence like that. Councillor Wilkes.
Yeah, I have to say, having just pulled up the map showing all of the dozen of sites for housing in concert, I've got a lot of sympathy with Councillor Hope's comment there. I want to get to the bottom of something though. Apparently there's 2 different applications related to this. One's been brought to committee by Councillor Hope. The other has been determined under delegated. Is that correct?
Yeah,
right.
That's correct.
So,
but it was for a separate application.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but they were both contributing to the same scheme, to the same junction improvement that Councillor Hope's referring to. So my first question is, on what date did Councillor Hope submit his request for this to be brought to committee? And the second question is, on what date did you determine the other application under delegated? Because what I want to understand here is, if somebody knows that something's been brought to committee by a member because they have concerns, why would they then pass through the other application under delegated, making it impossible for us to then refuse this application? Because in effect what we'll be doing is telling one applicant, you've got to pay for all of this, and telling the other applicant, well, the officers have already decided you don't. And I want to understand that, because it's really important, and if those dates don't stack up, then we're in a situation here where we cannot make a decision because of a decision that's been made elsewhere.
Can you just give us a moment to get them dates for you? Just 1 second.
Of course, I was told it was 3 days ago. A few minutes ago you said it was determined on the 3rd of the 7th, but I might have misheard that.
Oh no, it was probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago now that I determined the Persimmon application. But if you give us 1 moment, I'll find the
Thank
dates.
you.
If that is the condition 36, sorry Chair, that was on the 5th of June determined. When was it that I put my application in for this to come to committee? I think that's what Councillor Wilkes is asking. Thanks, Councillor Wilkes.
I've just been notified that the call-in request was the 9th of June. So I determined the other application in advance of the call-in.
So in advance of the call-in, you determined the application, and then when the call-in came in, no one told Councillor Hope that this was simply going to put us in an impossible position. Because what we'd in effect be doing here is, if we refuse this application, we're dumping the entire cost of the road improvements onto one of the two developers. There's a side issue as well that I have with this, is that a number of the sites that have been submitted for development in this area are council-owned land. And basically what we're in effect doing here is taking away the obligation on the developer and then dumping it onto the council at a later date for those sites that they're going to bring forward.
So normally Section 73 application would just automatically be a delegated item, so both the Millers and the Persimmon one started as delegated items. So obviously we've outlined the timescales that we used to determine that, and when Councillor Hope called the application in, then we did explain the situation that we'd already approved the Persimmon development, but Councillor Hope felt that obviously his objections were so strong that he wanted it determined at committee. I think Chair's already alluded to the fact that, yes, there's been a call for sites. There's a number of ones identified in concert, but ultimately those are not before us now, and at the time, if they ever do come forward, either under the plan as an allocation or as windfall sites, then they would have to justify and examine their kind of transport-related impacts under a TA. Ultimately, the decision before members is to assess whether or not the removal of this condition would meet the very high bar of resulting in a severe cumulative impact, and it's officers' opinion that no, it wouldn't. And yes, I think you've touched upon the fact we've got a difficult situation that we're essentially have already approved one application to remove a condition, and committee, if they went against that, Neil can step in obviously, but it would probably open us up to costs in an unsuccessful appeal.
Chair, thank you. I'll just add to Laura's comments on this. I think we've got 2 points that Councillor Wilkes has raised. The first one is a process around how we handled the early planning application. It seems to me from what Laura is saying that that application wasn't called up to committee. As members will be aware, all planning applications to vary or amend planning conditions start off as delegated. If a member or a town or parish calls it up, they come to this committee. For whatever reason, the early planning application wasn't called up, so it was determined under delegated powers. But I think in fairness, Chair, I think that's maybe a separate matter to be worked through potentially with Councillor Hope or Councillor Wilkes if he is concerned about this at a future date outside of this decision-making process. And the second point in relation to the call for sites, sorry Chair, but I think as Councillor Wilkes is aware, following debate at an overview and scrutiny committee the other day, that is certainly a matter for another date. But any any suggestion that we should take a decision on this planning application today to help inform land value on council sites as a future date, which I think is where Councillor Wilkes was going, was, I would imagine, a proposition that legal colleagues would have some severe concern about, and I think we should maybe leave it at that, Chair.
Councillor Wilkes.
I'll leave the second bit there, as you say, but there is a critical point here, is that if you've got a condition which applies to two separate planning applications, they're indivisible. Therefore, when they go out to be notified to councillors, they should go out at exactly the same time. Otherwise, we end up in this position where, in effect, it looks to the public like somebody's found a way around it by mistake. And clearly, we should have been contacting the other developer to say, are you also putting forward a condition? The two dates should have been linked together so that we don't end up in this circumstance.
Chair, as I said earlier, I think this is a process matter. I'm more than happy to talk through, I would say, suggest principally with Councillor Hope and Teesdale, if they are the concerned parties, or indeed with Councillor Wilkes. But as ever with planning applications, we have to deal with them in a timely manner when they're lodged. It's my understanding from talking to Laura that the other application was submitted earlier. We couldn't have, we couldn't, out of fairness to that developer, just decided to park that one up a few weeks. It went through the process in the normal manner. It wasn't called to committee. We've made a decision on it, but again, I think that needs to be treated as a separate matter outside of outside of how members consider this application today.
Any more questions? Councillor Potts.
Yeah, just a couple of things. Can I ask with regards to highways, and it's something I've brought up a couple of times and something that's happened in my area, is we keep talking about statistics that come back from the police with regards to accidents, whether they be injury, non-injury or whatever. Are you aware that the police no longer record non-injury accidents in County Durham?
Yeah, I know that, but obviously what I said before, Councillor, was that a planning inspector will only look at recorded accidents, which we have record of, and we would look at those when the applicant, like within this technical note, would do a full accident stat analysis. So they do it. That's their evidence. So obviously we don't work on hearsay that there was damage only or there was an AMS. We go on actual recorded accidents. So if there's just one minor there, there's no way that we could obviously look at this application and say the junction was unsafe. There's an accident trend there.
Yeah, I understand that, but we also got to understand that historically, all the accidents would have been recorded. So when we're working out these statistics for roads and junctions and things, we would have turned around and said, there's been 40 accidents there because 40 people phoned in the police. They would have turned around at some point and got a reference number for their insurance company. As of about 4 or 5 years ago, Durham Constabulary have stopped doing that just because of the amount of time and resource it's taken. So what we're doing is we're turning around and saying at this junction here, there's been one accident recorded in 5 years. And the reason for that is because Durham Constabulary have a certain criteria. So unless there's been an injury within that, or there's been severe damage to a vehicle other than the vehicle that's being driven by the person, then that won't be recorded. So it just seems silly that we're turning around and saying, well, the statistics for injuries or minor accidents or major accidents are this now. Well, there will be, won't they, because they're not recording them. Unless there's been something like a fatal or an injury accident, then they'll no longer be recorded. So that junction itself could have had an accident today and it won't be recorded. My wife was in an accident a couple of weeks ago at a bridge in County Durham, on one of our little bridges, smashed into by a van. I phoned up the police myself and they turned around and said, we no longer record non-injury accidents. So it isn't the case. It used to be the case that Durham police used to record them all. They don't anymore. So those statistics are worthless, really.
Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, I just had a quick question really for Dave. What is the speed limit on this road?
Yeah, it's 30 miles an hour. So the 85th percentiles were fairly, they weren't anything sort of as in high. Most of the 85th percentile speeds were okay, you know, when I've looked at it.
I was just wondering, obviously, looking at the information that was provided by the officers and listening to Councillor Hope's points, we seem to be talking about two different things. The improvement seemed to be more of a congestion kind of improvement, and what Councillor Hope's talking about is more of a safety thing. So I'm wondering, could we maybe put some speed limiting measures in, you know, you can get them kind of like bumps and stuff, and like them little ones and stuff, just to try and slow people down a little bit when they come to this junction, rather than, you know, looking at the housing development to improve the congestion issue. Maybe just look at some speed calming measures and see if we can slow the traffic down around this roundabout a little bit, so kind of, we're not looking at the developer to pay for it, but we're also kind of looking at the local residents' concerns and trying to slow our traffic down around that area.
Obviously, out of this committee, the member could speak to our traffic engineers and he could suggest some measures that he think would help with the junction. But as I said to you, it's designed to DMRB CD 116, you know what I mean? So it's designed to highway standards. And obviously with a mini roundabout, where it's positioned there, there's only so much land, that's why it's a mini roundabout, so you cannot do any physical curb works. Is in terms of the ICD in the middle, which is the turn-in circle. So it'll always be a spot mini, and it's got adequate signage, advanced warning signs, and as I say, everybody should obviously obey and give way to the right, and obviously follow the highway code. But obviously this assessment wasn't on highway safety, it was on capacity intervention, you know. So as I say, I can only look at what the stats are on the system and what the transport consultant's accident analysis is. Hope that helps anyway. Remember.
Councillor Hope, no, sorry, you've had your time to speak. Unless you ask a direct question, you cannot come back in, I'm afraid, sorry. No, so you haven't been, someone asked you a direct question. Any more questions from the members? Councillor Schumann.
Chair, thank you. Just listening to the debate, and you know, I'm sure we'll speak for all officers present that we want to try and get planning applications as 100% as correct as we possibly can in areas like highway safety. I think it's probably just worth us all remembering that the purpose for this original condition wasn't on a highway safety angle. It was just to improve the capacity of the roundabout, and I think, so, and I'm looking at Dave and Laura when I say this, to increase the amount of vehicles that could get through that roundabout at any one given time. So I think the problem, sorry, again, I'm sort of looking at Neil, but I think there would be a danger if we try to impose a decision on this planning application looking at what evidence members might think there is now on road safety. Now, it may well be if members present today had been in this room at this planning committee 3-4 years ago when this planning application was approved, listening to your views today, you may well have come to the view that that highway network and that principal road wasn't safe enough to take the extra traffic. But in fairness, and I think legally speaking, that decision has gone when the decision was taken to approve the development. So this condition and the money we were looking to secure at the time wasn't really related to highway safety. It was to do with a capacity issue. There might be a way forward here, in the sense that what we could do between myself and Dave's management in highway safety, in the highway safety team. So I'm thinking of Dave Lewin, potentially. I'd be quite happy to sit down with Dave from a traffic angle and see if there is any alternative measures that we could look to put in place as Highways Authority And there would be a question around where the funding would come from, that, Chair, because all local members will know that you've all got a number of requests for speed reduction and extra safety cushions and extra safety signs. But just listening to what members have put forward on the highway safety angle today, if that is a significant local concern, and Councillor Kenny Hope has put that across firmly with the support of Councillor Teasdale, I think we should really take that up as a separate issue, and I think Neil would probably support my view that we couldn't really turn this condition around. That was looked at capacity to try and maintain a requirement on the developer to do some work from a highway safety angle. I think legally, I think we'd be in difficult waters on that. But certainly using my ears and trying to find hopefully a pragmatic solution, I'm more than happy to sit down with Dave Wafer or Paul Anderson or whoever the relevant senior manager is in highway safety to see if we can, and I think on Councillor Potts' point, is there something for us to put some speed measurements down, Dave, or whatever. And I think we put cameras up at time to try and build a picture ourselves as to what the level of issues are, and then go away and see if we can work up some scheme outside of that. Because I do understand the issue, but I think Neil might want to come in. But I think in legal grounds, if we try to flip this condition over, I would imagine the developer would have a very strong case at planning appeal and might potentially look for an award of costs on the grounds that we've really acted outside of the scope of that original condition. Chair.
Chair, it's just to say I agree with what the development manager has said. We may accept that the accident database is imperfect in terms of the data it captures and the circumstances, but that is the official record that we have to look at, and as the highways officer said, that's what an inspector would look at an appeal. And equally, as Stephen said, it would be unreasonable to. So, first of all, have we got sufficient evidence of a highway safety issue? I understand we've got the observations of the local member, but in terms of the official evidence base, my view at the moment would be no, we don't. But even if we had, as Stephen says, it would be unreasonable to enlarge the scope of that condition to attempt to deal with highway safety issues when it was originally envisaged to deal with capacity only.
Councillor Schumann. Thank you, Councillor Wilkes.
Unfortunately, I have to agree. I think I'll second if that's a proposal from Councillor Shulman. I will second that. I would also say, I think, where you've got conditions that apply to more than one application, we need to take a little bit more care in ensuring that councillors understand and know that that's the case, and that we are contacting the other applicant to make sure that things come through on the same line, run through at the same time, to avoid any confusion in future. But I'll second that.
I still believe we're still on questions at the minute. Councillor Stevenson, did you have a question? Move. I was going to say go to the debate. Councillor Potts.
Yeah, just one for capacity then that we were talking about. We were talking about two large estates that have been built and we're only part way through there. What is the capacity of those estates and how many people are still to move into those estates? And the data that came for the current road capacity, has that came from our own highways, or has that come from the people who are now going to benefit from not having to pay for the junction?
I don't have the exact occupancy figures, so I'll try my best to answer the first part of the question. So the Persimmon Templetown Development Scheme isn't occupied at all. My understanding is the Gleeson scheme that preceded both of these schemes is occupied in full, and the Millers is well underway. So it was 288 homes. I would estimate there's maybe about 100, and Dave will be able to come on about how would they counts and how things get modelled in. So I'll pass it over to him.
Sorry, Councillor, in terms of the modelling, what do you need to know about the modelling in terms of?
It's just that we were told that the numbers are now different from when we first made this assessment for the amount of vehicles and things. Can I ask who did that assessment? Has that assessment come in from the builders and they've done some type of survey, or has that been done by themselves? Because the builders, they would have a...
Well, in a model, you'll have your base traffic, which is your standard daily traffic, and then you'll have your as built, what's committed development, and then you'll have your growth. So obviously all the concert sites and those modelling scenarios were all tested in the model, so it was a cumulative impact study.
Sorry, I understand modelling. I'm just asking who did the numbers for the modelling? Was it Durham County Council?
No, we don't do modelling, obviously, internally. It's so obviously... So it's, yeah, there's Milestone Transport Group that did the modelling, the cumulative study of all the concert junctions.
Councillor Eales.
Unfortunately, in my experience, the statistics and damn statistics, and you can make statistics whatever you want. I know I've done it myself. What concerns me here is the way the council itself has maybe looked at this and is collecting information, because it may be dated or needs rejigging the way they look at these things, especially when we hear now, and we've known this for a long time, that the police no longer record all the accidents. I can't see any reason why we've got to go with the planning officer's recommendation and approve this, unfortunately. But it obviously, what worries me is, as I say, it's a way we may be looking, the council itself is maybe looking at these things, and maybe the conditions that we can put on builders in the future to make sure we don't get caught out again.
Thank you, Councillor Eales. I don't think we've got any more questions, and I think we're more than happy, Councillor Stevenson. Move on to debate, yeah. And go on, Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, I think after hearing everything we've heard today, really, I think it's obvious that we're between a rock and a hard place, really. I mean, because of the previous one from Persimmon has already gone through, we can't really do anything with this one. Also considering the fact that all of our concerns here are really about safety, and the recommendation was to improve it more for congestion reasons. Yeah, I think we have to go with the officer's recommendation on this one. I think with Stephen's, suggestion that he gets his head together with Councillor Hope and Councillor Teasdale and comes up with some good safety things. I'm sure we can find the money somewhere to improve the safety of this roundabout. I think I'd like to go with the recommendation for approval.
Thank you. Any more debate? Councillor Potts.
Yeah, can I just say I'm really concerned about what's come before us today. I'm concerned by the way basically we're being pressured into making a decision here, either way, because of a decision that's previously been made. And I understand that's not totally your fault. I understand it's the way it came in, I do. But, what we're relying on is police statistics that we know don't exist anymore. We're talking about capacity instead of safety, which is fair enough. The original decision was capacity, but we're still not at capacity for the housing estates which have been built. All the people who live there, that's going to increase the amount of capacity. And it also, I just think it's a strange situation where we're relying on data that's been provided by the people who financially benefit from this restriction being removed. It isn't a good place to be as a person on this side of the panel making those decisions today. It really isn't.
Thank you, Councillor. As we have a proposer and a seconder in Councillor Schumann and Councillor Wilkes to go with the officer's recommendation to approve the application, can I please take a vote on yes? Any rejections? Thank you very much. And that application is now approved. Thank you very much. That concludes today's business. Thank you for your attendance. Please stay muted until the IT broadcaster confirms calling has ended.